Okay. First time in a while, man, you see, you know, you're 180 degrees. I don't have one. Thank you, sir. All right, welcome to our June 26th Board of Commissioners meeting. This is a special meeting to discuss an overview of the UDO and code enforcement issues. Jay, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. Give me a moment to get our slideshow started here. We're supposed to be able to control it here, right? What's happening? This isn't a good sign, already tech problems. Let's see if I can advance. All right, that works. So several months ago at the board's direction, we were asked to put together kind of an overview of how certain aspects of our Unified Development Ordinance work, and also talk a little bit about our code enforcement process. So we've already handed out some documents that we can talk about here in a moment that are part of the daily work that Kirk does. They're not notices of violation for your properties, so don't worry. These are there should not be names on them. If there are, talk to me afterwards. So our agenda this evening, pretty quick. We're going to talk a little bit about what the UDO is, and then briefly go over kind of our code enforcement process. We have invited Code Enforcement Officer Kirk Whittington to join us this evening, should you have any questions for him. So the UDO, and disclaimer, I did pull a few slides out of our Matthews 101 presentations that we do every September, just because it's a good reset and overview. So why do we plan health, safety, and well-being of our residents? Our Unified Development Ordinance comes out of recommendations within our planning documents. So here we have an image of our 2012 land use plan. Of course, you all aware that we're updating the comp plan. How does that process work? So here's kind of a quick diagram. Hopefully, if we get our comp plan approved this fall, we would have a new comprehensive land use plan in place. From that, we would begin to look at potential changes to the UDO, because you have to remember that comp plans are policy documents. They're not regulatory documents. So we can make all the greatest plans in the world, but without teeth or regulations behind them, they're not very enforceable. And these are just some of the various plans associated with the town's current comp plan, area plans, and things of that nature. We also have zoning, which is a part of the Unified Development Ordinance. And as you all are aware, zoning is essentially how land uses are divided throughout the town. Obviously, we have residential, commercial, industrial. Within the UDO, you also find the setbacks, lot areas, things that are prohibited, permitted, things of that nature. And this presentation is very quick, because this is really intended to be a conversation this evening and hear what questions you have. So I'm going to go through this pretty quickly and then open the floor to a discussion. And I was telling Nadine before the presentation started, I broke all of the rules of PowerPoint. You never put an entire chapter on the screen. I'm happy to email this to you as soon as we're done this evening, and you can reread it if you want. But this is our purpose statement within the Unified Development Ordinance. It essentially says to create a comprehensive set of land development standards and regulations consistent with the town's vision. These are provisions for zoning, subdivision, floodplain. More or less, Unified Development Ordinances wrap as much to the greatest degree possible all of your regulations under one umbrella. So if a citizen or developer, anyone wanted to learn what the requirements were or what they were allowed to do with a certain piece of property. They would have one document to reference. And in the old days, you had separate subdivision ordinances and zoning ordinances, and someone would say, well, I want to build a new subdivision. I'm looking at this document. Well, no, you're in the wrong document. You have to go look at the subdivision ordinance. So back in 2013, the Board of Commissioners adopted the current Unified Development Ordinance. It has an effective date of April 1st, 2014. So we're approaching 10 years that this ordinance has been in effect. Our previous zoning ordinance was adopted in 1988. So we've had two ordinances in about 35 years. I'm not going to read the purpose. This is just to let you know there is a purpose statement in the development ordinance that says why we have one and what the goals are in that purpose statement. Let me go back for a moment. Sorry, I meant to highlight this earlier. Essentially, there are references in the ordinance that say it will change from time to time, so it's a fluid document. There can be staff proposed changes, council directed changes, changes requested by developers or property owners, or changes mandated by statute, which we went through the 160D updates just about a year or two ago. And then here, yeah, it may be amended from time to time. So just the key points I want you to remember for the UDO is that it is a regulatory document. It is indeed fluid. It can and will change over time. And the board can always direct staff to work on modifications if there are certain aspects that there are concerns about. We would work with our town manager to direct staff to make the requested changes to the ordinance. So within the UDO, we have code enforcement requirements. They are primarily in Chapter 2, but there are also requirements in our general ordinances, which are outside of the Unified Development Ordinance at Chapter 94. Those primarily relate to public nuisances. So code enforcement primarily handled in-house. However, via interlocal agreement, we also work with Mecklenburg County. So our floodplain administrator is a county staff person. Minimum housing is the majority of minimum housing related issues are undertaken by county staff. So our primarily work is in the zoning realm and public nuisance realm, but there are other aspects of code enforcement, particularly with site inspections, building inspections, things of that nature that are outside of the work that Kirk does on a daily basis. It's just a picture of some tall grass. So how do penalties work? And I'll go over in just a moment the process. These slides are probably not in perfect order. Essentially, if someone is not complying with the provisions as laid out in our development ordinance, they are subject to warning notices, citations, and potentially liens if those notices are not paid. And we've got some of that is some of those examples that we distributed just before the meeting. What does that typical process look like? Typically, we start with an inspection. Inspections can be generated either by citizens or property owner complaints. It can be via routine inspections of the town that code enforcement does on a regular basis. After those inspections, there is a review of the code. What are the applicable codes? What is the potential infraction? If it is found that there is a issue with that particular property, a notice of violation is issued. Throughout the course of this work, Kirk does make acquaintances with property owners. Maybe it's somebody you've worked with from time to time. So if we have an email or a phone number, we'll also just reach out and say, hey, the grass is tall again. Can you get it cut, please? So we don't always go straight to a formal notice of violation, but sometimes that's our only method of reaching property owners. After the NOV, there is a set time frame. There's a follow-up inspection. If the issue is not remedied, there is a citation. Citations start at $50 and can go up to $500 per day. We had an issue, gosh, it's probably been about 5 or 6 years ago or more now, where we had one of the fish table arcade games that were not legal, not at least how they were running it. And we had a property owner bringing us $500 a day fines at one point. I think they were paying $3,500 a week in fines until the business ultimately was shut down or had to move on. But I've never seen someone pay that sort of fine. if we'll see that again or not. So what are the property owner's options? There's a few. Well, the first and the best option is to bring the property into compliance. There's also an appeals process. If it is a public nuisance, there's a 7-day window where a property owner can file an appeal that actually comes before you all, if it's subject to our public nuisance standards in Chapter 94. If it's not a public nuisance and it's a violation related to the zoning code, so maybe someone has built a building over a setback line, or their sign is in violation of the sign code, something of that nature, a variance can be requested before the Board of Adjustment. So there are several options that property owners have at their disposal to bring properties into compliance. I did just mention Chapter 94, so it's actually 9404. Again, this is one of those rare times where this is outside of the Unified Development Ordinance, because it's a general public nuisance ordinance in our town ordinances. This specifies the time frame and how a property owner could bring an appeal request before the Board of Commissioners. Charlie, I'm thinking back, these are kind of rare. When I first came to work for the town, we would have appeal requests from time to time, but it's been years since we've had a public nuisance. And when you think public nuisance, junk vehicles, tall grass, I recall one 10 or 12 years ago that was like a pile of firewood that was rotting, and neighbors had concerns of, like, snakes, vermin, all the stuff it talks about with nuisances. So, but those do come about from time to time, but it has been a while since one came before you all. That's all I have for you this evening. I promised we have roughly an hour, so I didn't want to talk too long. Kirk's here if you have any questions for him. We've got some of those samples of our NOVs, and they highlight the timeframes, how the letters go out. Also the sample, I think you had the citation and the warning notice. Was there anything you wanted to add? You're welcome to have the floor. Okay.
All right, thank you, Jay. I think one of the purposes that we asked you to review this is there was some concerns that maybe some portions of our UDO are maybe overly restrictive or no longer pertinent. In particular, we had a citizen, Mr. Bennett, come here and was talking about the name of his company being on the side of his truck. I personally see that quote unquote violation pretty regularly in Matthews. Commissioner Tufano, do you have a comment, question?
Hi, Jay. I was just wondering, was there anything that spurred this particular presentation tonight, a particular instance that happened, a citizen complaint?
So as I recall, been about 2 months ago that you all had this conversation about Mr. Bennett's trailer being parked in the driveway, but there were also some other questions about code enforcement, nonconformities, and some other issues some of you all had witnessed. So there was a request to kind of have a conversation about how code enforcement activities occur within the town.
Yeah, I think part of that was talking about, for lack of a better term, grandfathering in someone who took down a structure or a fence or something of that nature and attempted to put it back up in its original form, and putting it back up in its original form was now a violation of the code.
Okay.
I don't see any of that in this literature. So is that a subject that we are going to cover at a future date?
I'd be happy to address it now. I don't have any slides, but what you're speaking of are nonconformities. So we have legal and illegal nonconformities. The situation you're referencing with your property, the freestanding detached garage you had, for several decades, 20 or 30 years or more, we've had a requirement that accessory structures cannot exceed 50% of the heated area of the primary. See the head nod, we've been through this, and can't exceed, I think, 750 square feet for a detached apartment. So you had a legal non-conforming structure. Once the structure is removed, and that can apply to a structure, it can apply to a commercial parking lot that doesn't currently provide stormwater detention. So once the property owner takes the impervious pavement away, they would then be required to meet current codes for stormwater and those sorts of things. So once the structure is removed, the current code kicks in. There's no quote grandfathering status once something's been removed from property.
So the key is that the structure gets removed. If it was completely gutted and redone on the inside and the outside shell remained and was not touched, then that would be continually be legally non-compliant.
So we have specific standards that relate to how much investment can go into a non-conforming structure. In a residential setting, we probably would not approach those. So yes, normal repair and maintenance would never trigger a requirement to have to take the structure down. It could remain there as long as you wanted it there.
Okay, thank you.
And just to add to that, another conversation that has come up sometimes about grandfathering is if something has just been in place for a very long time and the town hasn't seen it, sometimes 10 years, 20 years, that's been something else that has come up. As far as, is there any grandfathering in the code where if something has just been around long enough, is it something that would then qualify for some type of exemption? And can you just speak to that doesn't exist in our present code?
It almost doesn't exist, but there was a statute change several years ago that said for nonconformities, there's a 10-year clock placed on municipalities. So if there's a reasonable method for, let's say someone has a pylon sign on a road and we know those aren't currently allowed in the community and it's been there for 5 years or whatnot. There's a 10-year clock where if the local government doesn't notify and bring some kind of action once 10 years passes, there's no longer, it can remain, there's no further action. So that's not the entire statute, Charlie, but more or less it's made it even harder for us to regulate nonconformities due to the statutory changes.
I know ignorance of the law is not an excuse, but it seems like we're catching a lot of our, not a lot, but occasionally catching our citizens in a gotcha moment where they just didn't know what the rule was. And there's nuances like Commissioner Tofano mentioned. If you gut the inside of a structure and rebuild it, it can stay. But if you tear the whole thing down, then it's got to comply. I think, I don't know, maybe we need to do a better job of making our citizens aware of what the rules are because we had the situation recently where a fence was put back up the way it had been forever or for many, many years. And then that was a violation. And I'm not saying Kirk's doing anything incorrect. He's absolutely doing his job. So good job, sir. But maybe we can do a better job of informing our citizens what the rules are. Because I think a lot are unaware that there's even rules governing some of these things. Commissioner Urban.
Jay, so let's point to like declaration of junk vehicles and general statutes. So in order to make any modifications, we'd have to go back to Raleigh to deal with some of these things. And I guess case in point is that, and I don't know whatever happened of it. We know that of Cress some years ago dealing with a neighbor. I don't know the name of the street. I vividly remember going by there and there were infinite number of cars in the front yard and just as many cars in the back and a boat in the whole 9 yards. And the declarative was all the vehicles had a valid registration.
Yes.
But the other point would be, to sort of John's point, is half of them probably hadn't moved since the grass was growing up in and around them. And so that sort of dilemma, because I felt bad for the neighbors because they were living proverbially next to a junkyard. But based on what we had here, it was all within context. So if the board saw these subtleties in these things, what would it take to at least lift it up and then start this conversation about changing something?
So that, I remember that property. We've actually, you may have even done a follow-up investigation after carload. So what you had there was a crowding problem. It was about a 1/3 acre lot. They had a double driveway and they just had a lot of toys. They had a lot of cars. It was not a particularly deep driveway. So I think they had the cars double stacked at four or five on the property. But there's a test for whether something's a junk vehicle and it's like $500 worth of damage, tires maybe in there. Yeah. Deflated tires, lack of a register, like those after multiple inspections, none of those vehicles met the definition of a junk vehicle.
No, and that's fine. And I just knew that one we were familiar with, but
Yeah.
I think there's been case in point where we've all driven by someplace and like, wow, I mean, look at all the cars, they haven't moved in a long time, that type of
Mhm.
thing. And they sort of fall in between the cracks. The other thing is that you see a lot of, people sort of working out of their homes. They're parking company vehicles in their backyard. They're prepping in the morning at 6 a.m. They're doing things and some employees are showing up and then the trucks sort of pull off, but there sort of seems to be some construction type businesses operating from the backyard, so to speak. But once the cars and vehicles are gone for the day, no one knows any different and they miraculously return at night. But
Those are, we have one code enforcement officer, he
Yeah,
has set
yeah.
hours, so that activity can be difficult. We do partner with the police department from time to time when there are either things that need a police presence or if it's noise ordinance or after hours. But those can be tough. We have a home-based business ordinance.
that's what I
So,
was gonna ask. Is that
Yeah.
part of that conversation?
so we have home-based business. You can have, I think you can do like yoga if you only have one client at a time. I mean, you can't do like cabinetry making, things with saws and hammering. So nothing that would, no auto repair, nothing of that nature. You can run your accounting business, your architecture business from your house. We did open it up back in 2012 to allow some commercial vehicles associated with the home business to be located. So we created definitions for certain sizes of commercial vehicles. And this was all from a complaint from a local landscaper that said, look, I have a truck. This is part of my livelihood. Can't talk to the board. We ended up working on a set of pretty substantial changes to the code that created these definitions and created the allowance to have I think it's called a mid-range commercial vehicle, and there's a gross vehicle weight, a total length of the vehicle and a height. And it did allow for it opened up more home-based businesses for like landscaping
I
contractors.
think I remember. I had trailer sizes too. I think
Yeah.
part of that conversation. I remember that one. Thank you, Jay.
Commissioner Tefano?
Yes, Jay, is it possible to communicate with the Mecklenburg County Permit Department and just ask them to, whenever there's a demolition permit, is to have some type of caveat statement given to the person that's taking out the demolition permit to tell them that if they're attempting to rebuild in that same location, that have to conform with the current town codes. I think a reminder like that sure would have been helpful to me.
That's a good idea. I mean, their forms are oftentimes standardized, but I think I can absolutely bring that up.
Yeah,
I like-
just
I
a
like that's good start.
little addendum sheet
Mhm.
along with the demolition permit.
Right.
I think that would be quite helpful.
I definitely could potentially help with your particular issue you
Yeah.
dealt with.
All
Mayor,
right,
Mayor Pro
thanks.
Tem McCool?
So I hate to harp on the one citizen, but Mr. Benadu came, him and I had
Yes.
a long conversation and he made the same point you just said, is that he, is running a business out of his house. That's his livelihood. That's how he can afford to live in Matthews, is having his truck and trailer. So what exactly was he breaking? What if there's some allowance of that?
So Kirk's, we don't have we used to have this old overhead projector in here that it actually was occasionally useful, but I'll just pass this around. I'll let Kirk will pass that around. So the particular issue was the storage of a trailer in the front setback. So if you have a boat or RV, any kind of trailer like that, we require it to be parked beside or behind the home. It can't be in the established front setback.
So even if the driveway is technically in the front setback, that doesn't count, like a lot of houses are.
Right.
And see, like, to me personally, that doesn't make a ton of sense. If that's your driveway, that's where you're gonna park a trailer. He's not gonna park it in the mud next to his house, right? I mean,
What if, but if he covered that sign up though, does the whole issue go away?
No,
No.
it's
so
still a
it's
trailer.
not even about the sign. either.
But
The sign's
he-
a separate issue.
yeah, that's a separate issue, but we said that if you have a Spectrum truck, for instance, that's allowed, right? I'm having a hard time.
Yeah, why are we singling out
I mean,
small
from
business?
If you work for Spectrum, you can have the name of the company on the side, but if you have John's Yard Service, you can't. That doesn't seem fair.
So the way the code's currently written, it says no exterior evidence for home-based businesses. The concern is that you have people putting up signs for businesses in their residential neighborhoods, and that's typically something people may not want to see in their neighborhoods, is commercial signage in a residential setting.
And,
The-
and Jay, just to keep the issues clear, because there's a couple of issues going
Yeah.
on. So with the trailer, the requirement is that it's on the side of the house
Yes.
or in the back of the house, regardless of size, regardless of whether it's for a business, whether it's for your jet skis, a trailer of any kind cannot be in the front setback. And so that is not business or livelihood specific. And that is in alignment with most of the other communities around here. Kirk did some investigation into what our neighbors have in their codes, and it's very much in alignment. Some are even more strict than ours. So regardless of type of trailer, it needs to be on the side of the home or in the back of the home. And then there's the separate issue that is the sign for the business, but that is a separate violation, a separate conversation. So I just want to make sure that we're keeping the two in their lanes.
Ken, let me get to you for 1 second. I just want to make a comment. I'm thinking about, so how do you, can you give me the definition of setback?
I think it's actually in the packet of things.
Okay, so
The
it's,
the trailer notice, I knew would come
Is it-
up. Oh, I'm sorry. The trailer notice should be in there, home-based business as well, and it tells you the prohibited businesses you can have and.
but I mean, is the setback mean that the trailer has to be level with the physical front of the edifice
The
of
way,
the
the way I
house?
describe the setback is from the front building part, and Charlie may say something different, but it's where your home starts to be built. So if this was a home, it has to be from here back,
I got you.
not in
So,
front. So that's there's two setbacks. That is the established setback, and then there's a required setback, which is a whole nother ballgame, but it doesn't have anything to do with trailers.
so I think of many of the houses, including the one I live in a subdivision, and I have a side load garage, and it would literally be almost impossible for me to park anything. I would have to drive through the woods of my front yard, and it'd be almost impossible to park anything behind my house. So I suppose I can't have a boat or a trailer at my house. It's physically just not impossible, and it's impossible if you have I have a very large lot, but a lot of people have, third acre, quarter acre lot with a driveway that goes up to a garage. It's literally impossible to park behind. So you just can't park a boat or a trailer at your house. Is that what we're saying?
Not the way the ordinance reads at this time. No.
And so that's where you have the private businesses where there are lots where you will see, people are paying rental space to keep their camper, to keep their trailer, and then they just go retrieve it when they need it.
Ken, then.
Well, that was the point I was trying to make, is like, based on your lot, to determine if you can have a home business or not. I kind of find that outrageous.
Well, I'm
to be
thinking
honest.
about your house where you
Yeah,
live as well.
Exactly. I couldn't.
Where
I
are you
couldn't-
gonna park in the backyard?
Yeah, so I guess can be buying a boat anytime soon.
Commissioner Garner? Then I'll go to you, Larry. Go ahead, Larry.
Thank you. I have a different question. I received a text from a citizen on Charles Street that the garage is parking his cars in his lot. And he's asked them to remove it, but they're not. I don't know if have you received that? All right, so he sent me a picture of his lot and a picture of the cars from the garage that's parked over in his property. And he can't get them to move it. So what can we do to help him? And I don't mind giving you his name because he's
So going back to what I was talking about with nonconformities, you're talking about those warehouse structures on Charles Street.
it's the garage right next to it.
Yeah.
And then Mr. Clay his property is next to it.
So those are nonconformities. I can't say if they're legal or illegal. They've been there for decades. Typically, if there is no zoning violation, it's a private property matter that they would have to seek out legal advice or talk to the police department. But that's not a zoning violation, most likely. Be happy to look into it.
So he could take his garage cars and park in this man's property?
I think it would fall more towards the police, because then you have trespassing. Being a police officer for 22 years, I believe that would go towards more of a criminal issue as far as trespassing. And if it were, my property, I would say he could probably have them towed, because it is.
Well, I
something
think
that's on
he's
his property.
asking for some advice. So direction. Could you help him with that?
If you'll send me his information, I'll be more than happy to
I
talk to him.
certainly will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Garner.
Is this still a complaint-driven process?
Sorry, repeat
The-
that again.
When citations are issued, is it still a complaint-driven process? Is it somebody calling and saying,
Go ahead.
I mean, just saying that there's, this doesn't, their grass is too tall, or there's a,
Citations aren't issued for public nuisance things. They're only issued for zoning, like a business putting up a sign, a temporary sign, or building a building. For
Okay.
public nuisances, it's more of sending them a written warning saying, well, first the notice, give them 15 days. I always send everybody a written warning, no matter what it's for. Giving them another 15 days. So technically they have 30 days. After that 30 days, I have a vendor who's approved by the town and he goes and cuts it. And then that's where it goes through possibly putting liens on the property.
okay. So I just used the incorrect word. I'm sorry about that.
But Kirk, can you speak to, most of your work is
Yes.
complaint driven, and then you also do some proactive driving around to see if you see any violations, but most of it just based on workload capacity. Your day's pretty filled up with
I-
responding to complaints.
Yes, I would, if I have to give you a number, I'd say probably 96% of my job is complaint driven. And then the others are, I'm just the type of person, if I'm going to one house, I'm not gonna put blinders on and not see everything else that may be. So you give that 5% that it is me doing it. Just this year, I came up with some numbers and I've had roughly 190 complaints already this year, just by myself. A lot of it is the things I've given you: trailers, grass, temporary signage. But like I say, 96% is a complaint driven. The neighbor or another business has got in trouble when they're complaining on another business.
I ask because in the past 2 months, I've had more people come to me, having not citations, but notices written to them than I have in the past 4 years. So it seems like there is definitely an uptick in, notifications. And from this conversation, I think it, not necessarily the work that you're doing, but the ordinances overall are particularly burdensome to our, probably older residents and residents on limited or low income, especially if you are a blue collar worker and you park your tow truck in your driveway and you don't have a backyard or you don't have access to your side yard. And that to me is a big concern. Also from Commissioner Tafana's experience and our own trying to figure out how to have our garage rebuilt. It is burdensome to homes that are older in Matthews and that were built long before these ordinances came to be. It creates an issue for us to have our camper in our yard when we have a 12-inch side yard on one side. We rented a dumpster several years ago and couldn't get it into, we had it in our backyard as it was supposed to be, but because our backyard is so close to the street, we were notified that it was not in compliance. And I would like you to go back several slides. And this is because this is going to be fun for all of us.
Roughly, where did you want to?
Keep going. That one. That's my yard.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Oh, that's really funny. I asked Kirk to find some old photos. So I don't know. He just pulled from random.
Let me ask you about this because I'm fairly certain that's my yard, and what you're seeing are river oats and rare grasses that are native to North Carolina that I ordered specifically. And it's also the portion of my yard where that 5-foot setback was an issue because I did have rare and endangered plants in that area. And the painters killed them when they came and put their ladders up. And so it's a particularly touchy topic. But I guess my question here is, when you do have plants that are tall and are intentionally seasonal, like river oats, where the seed head is really what you want to see. I mean, you can mow it down and it just looks like grass, but in the fall, you want it to be about 18 or 20 inches and you see the seed head and you see it come into a sort of a tan color and then this brilliant red. you're waiting 3 seasons to see this plant, but it's tall and it may look like a nuisance, but how do you discern what is a nuisance and what is a valuable habitat for native fauna?
Well, I can tell you this isn't yours because this was a recent one and I don't think you received a notice from me, have you?
I haven't, but it does look just like.
It is
an
not,
area.
nothing is anybody up here. If
Okay,
it was, then you might would have got a notice from me. But
it
is
looks
not-
like, well, it looks like exactly where, like, it looks exactly like. part of-
Nothing's, no, I can promise you it's not.
Okay, well,
But
that's good, but it does
to-
look like my river.
answer
and
your
it looks like my
question, it's-
Calicarpa and
I
my,
can only go on what the ordinance says. It doesn't specify a natural habitat area. It doesn't specify sunflowers or whatever. It just says an obnoxious weed or grass that's over 12 inches or higher, and that's what I have to base it on. I'm not a landscape person. I'm not a flower. I just, based on what I do and as a visual inspection is what I go on and then look back at the code to see if it fits.
I think that's something that we as a board have to talk about, especially as we encourage habitats and new construction. And, you know, and that's not anything, you know, obviously your job is to follow the code and enforce that. It is something that we need to talk about as far as how we can discern what is a native habitat or what is a plant and the value of that plant versus what is a nuisance and what is, you know, what is that threshold?
So there is a, there are a couple movements. I don't know if you've heard no mow may.
I was gonna say, yeah,
Yeah.
there's definitely a movement in there. John, I think some of our mutual friends are probably part of it. Where
But some communities have also found that when things get so tall, the grass is very difficult to mow. Once you let it go 15, 18, 20 inches, then you have to go in with weed eaters and it's too much for a
yeah.
typical residential mower. What I've also witnessed here is that I've heard this argument over the years, and it's people that they don't want to mow their grass, and we have neighbors complaining, and the person says, well, I've created a natural habitat. And is it? I don't know. To the average person driving by, it just looks like an unkempt lawn in front of a house. So that making that judgment call, that's puts staff in a really uncomfortable position in an ordinance saying, well, I know you mean well, and it's a butterfly or a habitat for honeybees. This person, they just have really overgrown fescue or crabgrass or whatever it may be. So that, I mean, we could certainly look at ordinances around the country and see how other communities are handling it, but it's a tough test for Kirk because it's based on it being 12 inches on average.
Can I ask a question? I'm going off of memory here from
Yeah.
one of the cases that we talked about. Is there not something in the current ordinance where there's a certain percentage of the grass that is allowed to be longer?
I believe it's based on, there's different, it may be in the packet I gave you guys, I can't remember, but there's for a acre lot, can be, 100 feet from the street. So it breaks it down to different, if it's if there's nothing on it or if it's in the subdivision, but I think it's 1/4 maybe. I may be wrong. Don't quote me. I believe it's
Right.
in there.
But kind of to that point, I think there's still a different conversation as far as if somebody wants to let their entire yard
Yes.
go natural. But there is something within the existing code that if you wanted to do a portion of your yard as a natural habitat that allowed it to grow longer, there is some latitude in the existing code, so
and-
long as it falls within a particular size
I think
parameter.
it's 1/4 of the yard, the full yard, if it's like this with a home on it. And I have had instances where people mowed everything except for, this much in a good strip and neighbors complaining. I'm like, sorry, if it's the code, I can't make them cut it. So I find that usually when there's neighbors mad at another one, they'll just leave a good strip right down the property line and like, I'm sorry, I can't do anything. So there is, I think it's 1/4. I might be wrong.
I do think that there needs to be some delineation of how that is applied. And I'm not sure what that looks like, but this does look exactly like a portion of my yard. And understanding that is like, I could show you what the plants are if you were, if you visited my yard. I could show you, well, this is this and this and this. This is the value of that, and this one produces food and so on. But I think if we're just if we as a board are encouraging habitat and we are encouraging native plants, we need to have an awareness and a structure in place to say, okay, I recognize that, it may not look like a Southern living front yard. It may look like something else. I understand the difficulty in your position to do that, Jay, but I also think that it is extremely important in this, especially in this town where we emphasize our butterfly habitat and our native plants and our wildlife habitat certification and things like that.
I'm aware of a few folks in my, in the beekeeping community that plant pollinator plants. The few that I'm thinking off the top of my head, though, it looks more kempt than that, it's kept up a little bit, and then maybe a butterfly bush or something like that. Mayor Pro Tem?
Well, yeah, I guess I kind of wanted to challenge that is who's going to do that? Are we going to have Kirk take classes on what plants are, and every time he has to go inspect every, right? I don't know. I don't see the how you do that without it putting a burden on staff or having to hire someone who specifically does plants for, that's what they do.
Well, I think that we either continue to encourage habitats and continue to encourage native plants and create a framework here, which is not impossible. I'm sure there are other jurisdictions that have done this, or we stop doing that because
But there's native plants that follow the code. I think it's not every native plant doesn't follow the code. I guess that's where I'm confused is, we want to have native plants, but they follow some sort of code and we approve them in a zoning, right?
Well, I think the answer is we like to borrow liberally from neighbors. And if they have, if someone has done this work, there are certainly other communities that put a focus on native habitats and all of that. And so I think it's at least worth doing some digging around and seeing if there are other examples that might, broaden it, create a discernible framework that doesn't require, special classes or close inspection. That could be something for the board to consider. Jay, do you want to talk a little bit about the UDO like the planning for the UDO updates from here, that something like that? I think there's some good time for us to be doing some of that research as we move forward.
Can I make one
Go ahead, Mr.
quick
Buckley.
comment before you go to them? This is a prime illustration of when laws are first created, there was a purpose for it. And at the time these nuisance laws were created, diseases were rampant of the type that spread through rats and vermins and things like that. And so one of the places that they could deal with trying to overcome epidemics becoming pandemics at a time would be to have all the habitats for vermin taken down so that you could get rid of the rat population. So this got started because of this becomes a habitat for vermin as well. And so now years later, we don't necessarily have the vermin that was prevalent in a more rural area. We're now urban and we just don't know that vermin are going to be in that area. So I can understand the sensitivities of the world today versus the world of 1945. And that's what we're faced with right now, but the law doesn't change that quick. Illustration, when I first went to work for the city of Charlotte in 1969, there was an ordinance on the city code of Charlotte that made it a misdemeanor to spit on the sidewalk. And we all would laugh about that. Well, what's that for? But when you went and researched it, that was adopted in 1918 during the pandemic of the influenza pandemic. Well, it never got off the books. So a lot of these things are archaic in one sense, but the other sense, they do have a purpose. And the only measuring stick they had was, does it reach a certain size? And that's all that we're faced with until we have discussions like you bring out tonight, until we come up with some resolutions like Becky says, let's look at what other communities are doing who may have already faced this. Those static laws are going to remain in place until we have these discussions. So I want to just say, I think this is outstanding that we want to take what was a static ordinance and make this a 21st century ordinance.
I know there's places out west, Albuquerque and some other places where the town will actually give you a tax break if you plant no grass and you spray paint your yard green and don't use any water. So
So
Go ahead,
before I
Jay.
get to your point, Becky, about the UDO, so one place we diverge with homeowners associations, many newer ones have requirements that you have to have a weed-free lawn, you have to fertilize and seed regularly. Local codes are very baseline. It's like, we don't care what's in your lawn, just go cut it. So if you want to have, manicured lawns are food deserts for pollinators. There's no food, bees, there's nothing there. Grass doesn't really do anything to support the environment. So if someone wants to have clover, dandelion, whatever is considered by some people to be a weed, you've got that foot that you can go up to 12 inches. It can be parts of the yard. So I think there's that ability to let your lawn be more natural and not be as manicured. So it goes a certain way, maybe not to the extent that you want it, Commissioner Gardner. But to your point, Becky, so this meeting, to those listening, may sound kind of dry. We're sitting around talking about code. Like, how fun is that? Well, my warning to you is that the comp plan is the fun part of the process. We're dreaming it all up right now. What do we want to be when we grow up? What's the vision for the community? What is best practice is after you adopt your comprehensive plan, you immediately start looking at your codes and where are the disconnects. What in these visions and these codes doesn't really align with what our vision is for the community. So most communities go through a lengthy and can be quite intensive rewrite or significant update to their development ordinance. Charlotte just finished it a few months ago, and for a city of 900,000, there were some controversial changes made. You may have read that in the paper, the missing middle conversations about duplexes and quadplexes. That was a little bit of a lightning rod for the city of Charlotte. So I'm not suggesting that's what we'll be discussing, but when it was adopted in 2013, we had just concluded about 3 years, and we had former Mayor Bailey. I remember him saying, we're going to go through this thing line by line. And that really kind of scared some people. Like, we got 400 pages to get through. So stay tuned. We'll be doing this more in the future. So to your point, Becky, we can certainly make changes now. We don't have to wait. If there are aspects that you want us to do research on or look at modifications to, we're more than happy to do that. There's no rule that we have to wait till next year.
one thing I specifically wanted to discuss was and I brought it up earlier, is the difference between if somebody works for Spectrum and they drive a truck home compared to a guy that runs a yard service. Why do we have that differentiation in our code?
That's an interpretation. I know what Charlie's about to say. I think that's one opportunity to amend the home-based big business section of our ordinance to make that distinction that you can't regulate different messages for signage.
No, that's not what I was going to say. You
Okay, I
can.
tried to read your mind.
You can regulate different messages and different signs when it comes to off premises, on premises.
Okay.
You can for certain billboards now. That's all changed since that Reed versus Tiny Gilbert. But the point is that what we used to call customary home occupation, I'm not sure, what is it called today?
Home-based business.
Home-based
Yeah.
business. The theory is that you want to keep traffic out of the residential neighborhood. But this particular business will not generate traffic. It will not bring people into it. So that it's okay for a Spectrum truck to park because it's not going to bring people to that neighborhood. Whereas this person who is conducting a home-based business may bring traffic. It may not, I understand that this was a landscape trailer, but it's still, that's the theory between the difference why there is a distinction, and the law has always recognized the distinction between on premises and off premises, and that still remains today. The advertising sign versus your business sign, that's an on premises, off premises type distinction.
Well, the gentleman that came before us was a contractor, so he's going out and installing toilets or something at somebody's house.
understand.
So
It
he's not
needs
doing
work.
work. He's not doing work at home.
Well,
And
yes.
I don't want to get into an unintended consequence where we have a big, tractor trailer that says, buy mattresses and neon colors parked in a residential area. But in this case, it seems grossly unfair to me that we have all these folks that have take-home vehicles that work for national companies, and yet a contractor or somebody that has a lawn business can't park their vehicle with their name on it next to their house. It seems overly restrictive to me. I mean, I'm one of 7, but I don't know why we would do that. It seems grossly unfair.
I can speak to that. Jay and Kirk and I have had some conversations to that point, and I think a clarification that may solve some of these concerns is continuing to not allow a sign on a home or in the yard. So you can't be advertising your home-based business with a monument sign or a sign attached to your door. But if there is a sign on the side of your truck, to not make it content specific and go ahead and allow those. So whether it's Spectrum or whether it's, Jim's Home Repair, that there's no distinction between the signs that are allowed. But then there would still be a separate conversation about trailers and where a trailer is allowed, because that is a separate part of the code where currently a trailer would still have to be on the side of the house or at the back of the house. But if the board is interested in amending or clarifying the existing code related to the type of sign that is allowed on a vehicle, that's a very simple couple of sentences max to just clarify what the intention of that code is. And that would be something that then Kirk would not enforce from there on out. That would be a very simple fix if the board is interested in considering that.
Now, to our attorney's point, I mean, I wouldn't want somebody to park a truck in their yard that said, I'm a psychic, come inside for a reading, because that's really, going to drive traffic there. But if you've got people that are leaving the premises to do work elsewhere, I don't really have an issue. Somebody else want to weigh in on that? I'm one of seven. Anybody disagree with that?
I think you could draft an ordinance where you added to that how the business is conducted on the premises. Right now, customary would have like a room that would be dedicated to the accountant or something like that, where if it's just a trailer on the premises, but there's no actual business going on in the house, then maybe that's the distinction from a home-based use. But I think we can design something that would make this fit for everybody.
But you can have a trailer on your property that's associated with the business. It goes back to the question of where do you want to allow utility trailers, boats, RVs? And frankly, those are complaints I've heard a lot over the years from neighbors that aesthetics are subjective, but it seems to really bother neighbors, particularly on smaller lots where people park very large, boats and RVs directly in front of the house. That's a common complaint we hear.
Commissioner Hoover?
I don't know if anyone has actually been out where this particular trailer is located, but the way the neighborhood is, I would not be surprised if he parked it beside the house. I don't know if you've checked that, if you'd actually be in your neighbor's yard. So that's part of the problem as well. And so, you're going to get it to your yard or your backyard, you're going to have to pull in someone's property beside them. Well, then in trailers, you're going to probably tear their property up in the process of constantly coming back and forth, back and forth. So if you can't park it on the side or in the back, where are these people going to park now? And if they're just because they're self-employed, to me, that's just, I don't know, like the mayor was saying, Spectrum, self-employed. I mean, you can't, if you're self-employed, you're self-employed. I mean,
It
doesn't make sense to me.
For this instance here, he has plenty of room to put the trailer, but most people do. I think like Mr. Ken said, some people just don't have the room, but the majority of complaints that I can honestly say I have received, most people do have the room to move it to side or put it behind. In this instance, Mr. Bennett did have plenty of room on both sides of his house. Actually, it was really close to his neighbor, but he never drove on his yard. And
yeah,
so it is.
That was just exciting. And I'm just really blessed because I do have space, because I confirmed with Jay first on what I was doing, and we are able. So I'm worried about people, who in the now or that have been built, they don't have any property really anymore for anything like this.
So the Board of Adjustment, we used to have meetings about 10 months of the year. And a lot of it was encroachments into setbacks and yards. We did some tweaks to the code, and your Board of Adjustment really shouldn't meet that often. If it does, it means you've got a lot of problems with your ordinance. Ours really doesn't meet but a few times a year. However, in Mr. Bennett's case, we did offer, and it was in the meeting when we met with him, Mr. Mayor, a variance could be appropriate. You can apply if you have an individual circumstance that's unique. The Board of Adjustment acts as a relief valve. So you don't necessarily have to throw your code out or amend your code over one property. There could be a variance. It depends on if it meets hardship standards that are set out in state statute. But property owners always have that at their disposal. We don't always have to change the entire code.
So in my case, again, I live on about 1.5 acres and I would have to drive across my front yard, which is very narrow, tear it all up and pull through a very wet area into my backyard to a boat. I have 1.5 acres, so I can't imagine what you do if you have 0.2 acres or 0.25 acres, to Commissioner Hoover's point. Ken.
Also, in speaking with Mr. Bennett, he said that he usually does park it on the side of his house. And that was his claim, and that, sometimes he'll go and eat lunch with his family because he has a disabled son. And he's like, I get a variance if I'm parked to eating lunch with my family because my trailer's parked in the driveway. He's like, what's that mechanism look like? I don't know if you have a response to that, but that's what he was saying to me. So
I have enough sense to know if someone's parking it or not parking it overnight.
Okay.
I'm not the hard person that some people make out that I am.
I was just stating
Yeah.
what he had said to me. And
It's, if I see something at home at 12 o'clock and I don't see it at 10 o'clock when I go by and I come back at 1 and it's gone, then obviously that person stopped at home to do something, which would be the same case as this. I've been by there seeing Mr. Bennett with his trailer with the doors open, getting things, and I rode right on by and he's getting utilities out.
well, the picture you showed, I think, shows his door being being open. So obviously he was doing something with that. So
I didn't see him out there that day. There's been a couple.
Okay, well, the
times.
doors are open to
Yeah,
his
I-
trailer, but so in that circumstance, say you drive by at noon, his trailer's there, will you drive by 2 hours later to double check, or are you just going off that one?
I just go off of what I've seen in the past. It pretty much people that run businesses, it's a routine for people. They do go home. They don't, of course, can't eat at the people's house that they're working on. So most go home. It's what I've seen, and I just use common sense a lot of times based on issuing notices or not issuing notices.
Commissioner Urban.
So I think we can see that there's a lot of nuances. It's not houses, you can't park alongside the property, et cetera. But I think if the board and the town as a whole is flexible and looking at ways in which to be proactive in these situations, I think to Renee's case, I think if the town board wanted to be proactive and inform homeowners about the nature of organic spaces and natural environments, you could craft something and educate them from that aspect of it. But we're just going to have to work through it like we've worked through in the last 20 years, all these little nuances and adapting some things. And some people I know, Kirk, probably, it doesn't matter how many times you go out there, they're just going to keep doing it. And we have that side of the thing. I think the important thing is more for Jay and being proactive moving forward. Sante would have been a perfect conversation had we had this discussion 6 months before that presentation, is to think about the nature of density, the nature of storage areas, and providing space that maybe is if there's a cottages of 20 or 30 units, that they have to hide in that component a landscaped 1 acre lot that allows for trucks, beds, trailers, and boats to sit there, where they provide some level of accommodation. Of course, I think the Morningstar mini storage lobbyists would probably go to Raleigh and kibosh that. But I think the ability to sort of think about that, because John's right on target in terms of, someone working and they have a truck and et cetera, et cetera. I guess the issue at hand where Becky and Kirk were going is the size of the truck, the size of the trailer and things of that. But I think we could also think about proactively in the future, the zoning cases, the missing middle, but are we missing the middle storage as well, and having that kind of accommodation in that discussion too.
So what I'm hearing, I guess, for a first pass is we would like, as a board, to maybe benchmarks. Number one, some natural areas, what other folks are doing for to allow for a natural area. And again, I know several of my beekeeper friends have very attractive looking natural areas, but it's not a yard. I mean, it's got wild grasses and things like that. Secondly, I think it's the will of this board. I saw a lot of heads nod to consider some sort of change to our ordinance regarding signage on trucks so that there's no differentiation made between a national business and somebody that's working in a home-based business or a working from their home. And I had a third point. What was it? Drawing a blank here. What else we talking about today? Oh, I know what it was. Commissioner Tefano had an excellent idea to reach out to Charlotte to see if when building permits or the county, when building permits are pulled, to have a notice sent. I think that's a great idea. Anything we can do to better educate, because unfortunately, Mark wasn't the first. I mean, a lot of folks, they go tear a fence down or they tear a building down. I'm like, oh shoot, no, I've got to conform to this rule that I didn't know about, and it's too late. So those three things, and I don't know if there's anything else.
And I think Jay needs to investigate that, because permits in Mecklenburg County, it's a double-edged sword there, because you're dealing with two separate entities. The left hand doesn't talk to the right hand. That's zoning in Meck County and Louisa permitting. And a lot of times we, the professionals, have to physically get on the phone and call zoning. Can you please release the hold, because permitting won't talk to them or don't throw the switch. So maybe there's some vehicle that which Jay can kind of, because if we permit something in Mecklenburg County, they reach out to Jay, and then Jay gives the blessing, and it goes from there. But there's also other underlying things. So I think I think it's a good point, but I run into this a lot, because someone says, "Oh, I was told I can do what I can do." And I said, "Who'd you talk to?" I talked to zoning, and you need to talk to permitting. And then people say, "Well, I can do what I do. I talked to permitting." I said, "And did you talk to zoning?" And they said, "No." And that's, sorry, left hand does not talk to the right hand. And
I understand, but it seems like they could at least put a sentence that says, talk to the local authority having jurisdiction to make sure you're not violating any zoning. I mean, that seems like a one sentence thing they could
Yeah.
do.
Despite the best laid plans, I had a call last year from a neighbor. They said, that detached garage looks really tall. And in my mind, I'm sure it's fine. We sent our zoning inspector, Brian Sifford, out. He said, yeah, what they built didn't match what was put on the permit, that they wrote down 20 feet and they built a 30-foot tall structure. So the neighbor caught it under construction, and the contractor had to drop the roof line. So every situation is different. But yeah, the demo permit example, that disclaimer is potentially a good start.
Just to add a fourth item, we also talked about some public education. With a 400-page document, it's hard to really point to everything, but we've talked about some of the more common issues that come up, or some of the more common home improvement or yard improvement projects that people might be undertaking, to kind of highlight those. And then otherwise, it's really just going to be a matter of, if you're planning to do something, please contact town staff, and then we'll be able to help and assist. And, is there something in the code that they need to be aware of, or are they good to go with what they've got planned? So with the length of the document, that's probably going to be the most customer-friendly message that we can try to get out there at the end of the day, is we're here to help. We would rather catch it on the front end than the back end.
All right. Any further discussion or questions or comments for Kirk or Jay? All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. I'd like to call for a motion to go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318-11A4 to consider economic development, to include the mayor, the board of commissioners, town attorney, town manager, assistant town manager, planning director, and town clerk.
So moved.
Have a second? Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, second by Commissioner Urban. All in favor? We'll take about a 2-minute break and then go into closed session. Good evening. Welcome to our June 26, 2023 Matthews Board of Commissioners meeting. I'm Mayor John Higdon. I'd like to start with some introductions. On my left and your right is our Assistant Town Manager, Malia Gordon, Commissioner Renee Garner, Commissioner Larry Whitley, our Mayor Pro Tem Ken McCool, our Town Manager Becky Hawk, Town Attorney Charlie Buckley, Commissioner Mark Tefano, Commissioner Renee Garner, and the invisible Commissioner John Urban, who will be here momentarily. What did I say? Renee Garner? Sorry. Gina Hoover, sorry. I'm like getting confused because John wasn't here. And there's John Urban. Our town clerk, Lori Canapino, our communications coordinator, Maureen Keith, and host of others of staff out in the audience. Sorry, Commissioner Hoover. Move on with the invocation, Renee Garner. The one on my left. Yeah, that's pretty good. That was good.
I am taking my invocation from another city council that was read several years ago, and I appreciated the words. Let us rise each morning and strive each day to do only that which brings happiness and joy to others, and avoid doing things that cause others hurt and pain. Let us use our minds and our reason to foster behavior based on the mutuality and reciprocity. I can't say that. I should have practiced. I'll go with mutuality inherent in human relationships. And let us always respect the dignity and worth of each other.
Thank you, Commissioner Garner. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag and to the republic and I'd like to ask the town manager if there's any additions or modifications to the agenda tonight.
Mr. Mayor, just one, we are going to remove item 13 as we were able to finish the conversation with the earlier session.
Okay, thank you. Entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Commissioner Hoover, I'm sorry.
I would like to make a motion to move item number 7I from the consent agenda and move to new business as 9H.
All right, with that modification, do I have a motion to move forward with the agenda as modified?
So moved.
Have a second. Okay, motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, second by Commissioner Garner. All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. All right, I'd like to go on to agenda item number 5, recognize Park and Recreation Month. And I'm going to read a proclamation. Mr. King, you want to step forward, sir?
Yes.
This, yeah, it's early, too early for you. Corey's usually last on our agenda.
It's not.
This is a proclamation in recognition of Park and Recreation Month, whereas parks and recreation programs are an integral part of communities throughout this country, including the town of Matthews, North Carolina. And whereas parks and recreation programs promote health and wellness, improving the physical and mental health of people who live near parks. And whereas parks and recreation programs promote time spent in nature, which positively impacts mental health by increasing cognitive performance and well-being and alleviating illnesses such as depression, attention deficit disorders, and Alzheimer's. And whereas parks and recreation programs encourage physical activities by providing space for popular sports, hiking trails, swimming pools, and many other activities designed to promote active lifestyles. And whereas park and recreation programming and education activities such as out-of-school time programming, youth sports, and environmental education are critical in childhood development. And whereas parks and recreation programs increase a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas parks and recreation areas are fundamental to the environmental well-being of our community. And whereas parks and recreation is essential and adaptable infrastructure that makes our communities resilient in the face of natural disasters. And whereas our parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our state and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And whereas local parks in North Carolina generated over $6 billion in economic activity and provided over 37,000 jobs, ranking North Carolina as 10th in the nation based on 2019 data. And whereas the U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Recreation Month, and the town of Matthews recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources. Now, therefore, let it be resolved that the town of Matthews does hereby proclaim July 2023 as Park and Recreation Month in the town of Matthews. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the town of Matthews to be affixed this 26th day of June 2023. And that was a lot of whereases. So,
It was.
Corey, if you want to say something?
Yeah,
sir?
just to add to that, Parks and Recreation Month is something that's is an initiative spearheaded by NRPA, National Recreation and Park Association, has been since 1985. This year, the slogan is "Where Community Grows." The attempt is to highlight the facilities, indoor, outdoor, trails, and all amenities in your local communities. They are these gathering spaces. They are these places where you can certainly meet people, I guess, build relationships with your neighbors. And also with July, we're going to have a number of different initiatives, most of it over social media, but just some things to encourage people to go out and visit the amenities in the community.
All right, thank you, Corey. Are we going to do a photo, Maureen? All right. I've often told Corey that my at-home office overlooks the 4 Mile Creek Greenway, and my wife asks how I get anything done because it's just a constant stream of interesting people skating and running, and so it's very well used. And Squirrel Lake Park is also near my home and very well used facility here in Matthews. So thank you for that, Corey. Going to move on to public comment. Lori, I don't believe we had anybody sign up tonight. Is that correct? Do we have anybody online, Maureen, that's indicated they would like to give a public comment this evening? All right, we'll move on to agenda item number 7, the consent agenda, items 7A through H.
I'll make a motion to approve consent agenda items A through H.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, second by Commissioner Urban. All in favor? Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Going to move on to unfinished business. Consider municipal agreement for EB 5969 NC 51 side path project. Ms. Stujenki.
Good evening, everyone. Okay, we're gonna see if we can get everything pulled up. I apologize. I sent a presentation, well, didn't actually attach the email, so I sent it just now to Lori, so I apologize. Okay, so I am here to talk to you a little bit about. Can everyone see that? Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm here to talk to you about NC 51. This is it's EB 5969, which is a multi-use path on basically Pineville Matthews Road in front of Nodoton Hospital. This is something we discussed last summer. I had a typo in my memo. So it was in 2022, we discussed this project, and the Board of Commission at that time allowed us to go after money for this project. And we successfully got this project through CRTPO. And it is going to be a 10-foot sidewalk with 8-foot planting strip. It's got, a lot of interesting things along this corridor. We really want to build the sidewalk. As you can see, lots of people use it, the corridor as, there is no sidewalk, but people use it and they do the best they can. It is, got a bus stop. We don't have any ADA capability here right now, and we want to fix that. So obviously we've got a high traffic count. We've got lots of generators and attractors, our core downtown, major employer, transit route, shopping, all that good stuff. So this is the actual memo that I drafted. And basically what you all are here doing tonight is just agreeing for the municipal agreement. So I sent a municipal agreement with the email, with the agenda packet. And unfortunately, it was not correct in terms of its funding. I have since sent Lori an updated correct contract. NCDOT didn't give us all the money. I failed to calculate until this afternoon to make sure to put in my agenda, this presentation, and I realized it was missing $1 million. So I called my friends at NCDOT and made sure everything was fine. They said it was a typo on their part. So this is how much total we are going to be for the whole project, 3.575 for the project. NCDOT will be providing this 2.86, and the town match is 700,015. This is slightly different than other projects before. We traditionally do a reimbursement program. There was a lot of back and forth about who was going to manage this project. NCDOT wanted to use a different kind of money, and it would create some difficulties for staff. So they decided they were willing to take on this project and manage it themselves, which is great. In addition to that, they also are going to design it in-house. So we don't have to go out for bid on the design portion. We'll save hopefully money by having NCDOT staff design this project. They're doing it also for a project in Mint Hill. It's very unusual. NCDOT doesn't typically do that, but we were able, there lots of things aligned, so they were able to do that for us. So we're hoping, we all know project costs are going up and all that good stuff, but we're hoping that we'll be able to stay on target because of this cost savings. So because of this, the way the project is structured, it's not a full reimbursable program. We're only literally paying the 20% as each phase starts. So as design phase starts, we pay that 20% upfront, and then they go on their way and they do work. And then when right away starts, we give them that portion of the 20% and they go on and do their work, as opposed to traditionally with NCDOT projects, we have to front the whole cost of that phase and then get reimbursed. So I think it perhaps is a little easier on our finances, but that's the way this particular project is structured financially. So that's all I have for you tonight. Do you have any specific questions about this project?
I just wanted to add, before the board perhaps ask you any questions, I did confirm with Teresa earlier today that as part of the FY23 budget, there was $500,000 approved in the CIP for this project, thinking that it was going to be funded under a different model. And so that money has been put into the CIP for this project. And so we are already $500,000 funded for the total $715,000 that is needed. And so the timing of the project and when we would have to pay that out, we would not actually look to need to come up with any additional funds beyond what we've already set aside for this project until essentially almost the very last year, essentially FY27. We might need $4,000 or $5,000 in FY26. But I just want to make sure that the board understands that if you do approve this, we would not be needing any additional funds for 3 or 4 fiscal years.
Commissioner Tufano.
Yes, what's the distance between the multi-use path and the roadway?
There is an 8-foot planting strip. Was it?
Yes, yes. What really concerns me is there is no second chance of someone, falling off a bicycle or a little kid running away from their parents. Those, what it's like on 51. Is part of the design of this is some kind of barrier or something of any kind to increase the safety along that road?
We have not, that is not something we've thought about doing any sort of guardrail, if that's what you're thinking. Just because typically NCDOT, I mean, they typically tell us it's their road, in terms of guardrails. We have that 8-foot planting strip for that precise reason. We have 10-foot multi-use path, which is our largest path that we create in town. And we have the 8-foot barrier, 8-foot planting strip for that reason.
What would be in that planting strip?
Any tree that NCDOT would allow, because they basically have different criteria depending on how fast you're going. It would have to be something small if we are allowed to plant anything at all, depending on how many driveway cuts and the site distance. There's a lot of rules NCDOT has in place. We'd love to plant trees, but the likelihood NCDOT is going to allow that is pretty small. We have to follow their standards.
Is there any possibility of having a continuous hedge in that area?
Susan's coming up here to rescue me. Hold on.
Okay. Something to inhibit
We hear you.
accidental pedestrian traffic.
We appreciate that.
Yeah.
Those comments.
Good evening. I really like this line of questioning. I love it. Keep it coming. So we can absolutely investigate different options, whether it's widening the planting strips so that we can provide trees, doing the shrubs, because DOT says, yes, we allow shrubs, but we have yet to see them approve it. So I absolutely agree with you, and we can certainly roll that into the project. And we'll just need to keep within this budget, because the farther away from the road we get, more right of way we need to acquire. So we can absolutely investigate that with the DOT design team.
Yeah, I think I'd be happy with aesthetically as well, is to have some kind of what do they call the types of hedges that purposely are impenetrable? I don't know.
Not a
Impenetrable
horticultural
hedge, how's that?
Well, and we have to
Yeah.
be aware too, the maintenance of the hedge.
Yes.
Right, and the trimming and the overgrowth. And so we would have to have property owner buy-in that they would perform the maintenance on the hedges, because we wouldn't be able to absorb that.
Yeah, if you could just look into it. I'm particularly concerned about little kids, especially on the multipath, and just taking off in one direction, and that's the end of that tune. So thank you very much. Right.
I think Commissioner Tofano's points are well taken, but I drive this corridor regularly, and what we have now is really bad. I mean, it's right up against the highway, and I see kids that are unsteady on bikes that are literally a few feet from cars going 55 miles an hour or faster. So good points by Commissioner Tofano, but at the very least, this would be a huge improvement over what we have now. Commissioner Urban.
So has there been any conversation with Novant about some dollars and cents crossing their property, because it's going to be beneficial for them?
Yes.
That's item number one. Item number two is, Jay, correct me, we have a zoning case pending between the oncology building and Novant, right? So we can have that conversation with that petitioner as well. So we can maybe work to get the numbers a little bit more satisfactory.
Yeah, and that's something we, as a precautionary measure, we made sure to include all right-of-way costs, including the ones across Novant property, just because we don't have any agreements in place, but we hope to work with all of our property owners and to see if anyone is willing to donate.
So our
property.
goal is, as a board, is to see if we can fund you $715,000. Okay, thank you.
Can you go back to the map?
Sure.
Yeah, Commissioner Urban made me recall that we had a nurse killed up there at that intersection a few years ago that was trying to find a good way to walk along that corridor.
151?
Yeah,
Oh, I
yeah,
don't
I
know.
remember that. That was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. Somebody was killed there. So very good. Any other questions, comments, or motions? Mayor Pro Tem?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the attached municipal agreement for EB-5969.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, second by Commissioner Garner. All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Let's move on to new business. Let's receive an update on e-scooter pilot program. Ms. Bennett.
As you know, it's been a year since the bird landed in Matthews.
Oh,
And I'm waiting for the actual the numbers to come up. I just wanted to give you an idea of how it's been going. Because it was supposed to be a pilot program, so it's time for a decision on whether you want to move forward or not. I actually had a little bit of trouble getting in touch with Bird over the past couple of weeks, but this morning, I got a response from them that they are, yes, interested in continuing in Matthews. So now it's kind of up to you. They said if the town wishes. So trying to figure out whether the town wishes or not. So total rides since July when they first landed, almost 3,000. 78 of those, I think, were self-identified as commuter trips. I'm not exactly sure. I think that it's something in the app that they can say whether it's a commuter trip. And then total miles covered, almost 3,500. So you can see we started strong in July, dropped off some in August, and then wow, look at September. And that's because our fleet manager was terrible. Just terrible. He was not rebalancing them, which means picking them up and putting them in places where they can be used. He was not charging them. So that if you found a scooter you couldn't ride it because it was dead. And Corey's gone, but he was the one who alerted me to that because he tried to get from Parks and Rec over here for a meeting, came here, tried to get back and had a dead scooter and then walked to another one that he saw. And then that one died too. So that's when I called them and said, can we do something about this? So they did.
Question, can I interject? You said 78% of the rides were.
No, 78 actual commuter trips.
78. So what does that mean?
That means 78 rides. They identified themselves as commuting. 78 out of nearly
What are the rest of
3,000.
them doing?
What's
I
that?
guess, what's the option?
Commuter as in something getting to a bus maybe, or getting to work. And the rest of
rest
it are
is
just
just for
having fun.
Okay, I got you. Thank you.
Right. So they replaced fleet manager. They really worked hard to do that. They understood that he was terrible. And you can see October, it went up a little bit again. And then winter months are usually very slow because nobody wants to be out there in the winter. And then you can see again, we kind of were moving up a little bit to May, June. It's not the end of June yet, so I don't have the full numbers on that. But we were a little bit on an upward trend. From what I've read, I've been reading about this today. Scooter usage in a lot of places is down right now. It's like not as heavily used as it was, but they are still, again, Bird does want to continue. If you know about Bird, and I know that some of you at least have been looking into this, Bird has really been up and down. There doesn't seem like they have a great business model, but they're still moving into communities and they're still committed to Matthews right now. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask a question about the financial part. Do they give us money per, so how much money has the town made?
Well, it's 10 cents per ride.
Woo.
So,
Okay,
and I don't
$2.
know, and I was gonna say, maybe Teresa knows. Of course, she doesn't really know whether we got a check from Bird. But I asked them that a couple of weeks ago, and that was when I didn't get a response. And when I followed up today, I just said, can you let me know whether you're still interested? So he answered that question. I need to follow up
So when
again.
it came to giving us our, what, $29 or $290,
Yeah.
$300, they
Right.
didn't want to give us for $300, but they want to stay in Matthews.
Right. Well, but I'm not sure yet whether it could be just we forgot. So I'm going to follow up on that.
And then didn't they give us a chunk at the very beginning?
I think it was 3,500. Yeah.
Okay.
So they would have to do that again.
Was that money like supposed to be, was the town supposed to use that at all for bird school? Like, was that supposed to help with anything or?
I don't know. I think
That's just general fund revenue.
I was going to say, I think it was just general fund.
Right. I just want to make a comment. I would like to maybe table this and get some more input from our citizens, because for myself personally, I've gotten way more complaints against the scooters than I have people that say I really enjoy them and I'm glad they're here. But I want to maybe the people that are riding aren't as vocal. So I'd like to have some more input. Commissioner Tefano?
Yes, about 6 months ago, I asked the manager for the number of distinct riders. In other words, we have total rides, we have total miles, but the actual number of people that are using this on a repeated basis. So what is I think at that time it was something like 120 some odd, I can't remember.
I can get you that information on a month by month basis, but I'm not sure if a distinct rider in 1 month could have been a rider from like
Right,
It
and
doesn't
that's
carry-
okay. That's
Right.
okay.
Yeah, I can get you that information. on a
So I
month-to-month
think it's on their
basis.
dashboard, is it not?
Yes, I have that information. I just
Okay.
didn't put it up here.
So in other words, I think a real interest would be of all the people in Matthews, of the 39,000 people in Matthews, how many are actually using it on a repeated basis? So those are what I call unique or distinct riders. So if you could get that information on.
I can, again, on a monthly basis, I can get you that
Yeah.
information.
Very good.
And I think the answer is, it's interesting to know that they've been complaining to you. We don't get that many complaints, and the ones that we get are kind of repeat offenders.
Well, the complaints that I received were
not
from
offenders,
a
but-
couple of the HOAs, and one of them was my HOA, and it was that.
Are you in Country Place, Benny?
No, I'm in Ashley Creek,
Okay.
but they had deposited 3 or 4 of these scooters in front of our neighborhood, and they weren't picked up for like 2 weeks. So they're just laying in a pile in front of, uncharged, laying in a pile in the right of way of our neighborhood. And so our homeowner president moved them across the street, but they literally laid there for a couple of
The
weeks.
thing that you can do, and this is when I do talk to people, is you can call and they will come quickly to move it. If you call and complain, they're pretty good about coming and moving it. But for the most part, if they don't get a complaint about it, they're
They
not.
complained to me.
Well, and
And you can let me know, and I mean, if you get a complaint, please tell me and I will make sure that they know, and then we can make sure that it's moved immediately.
Nadine has become our resident bird lady
I am.
on this.
Real bird
But
watcher.
I will say it did feel like there were certainly some strong opinions about the introduction of this program that we heard about. And then there were a number of complaints that we received that did seem to be potentially tied to the previous fleet manager. But it really has quieted down, I think, from staff's perspective.
Absolutely.
I don't get the complaints like we were in the beginning. And then to your point, they do seem to be quite responsive when things.
But
do
you have to
come
let
up.
them know. And there was a woman I spoke to recently, and she was complaining about being, I think, near her yard, actually. And I said, well, did you call or did you email them? Or well, I just don't want it there. Did you can email them and they will remove it. I just don't want it there. Okay, well, like if you don't do something about it, I said, or you can let me know where you are, and I can anytime just call me and I can let them know. She did not seem interested in that.
Isn't there a mechanism within the app to report?
But then you have to have the app, and probably most of the people who have complaints about it aren't going to have the app.
That's true.
But I think it's actually on the scooter that it's got the Matthews contact. And it's Matthews 311. So, I mean, it's a pretty easy one to do. And I know that when I've sent them complaints, they have moved them quickly, because I mean, and this was a while ago, but I've gone out and checked, but I really haven't had many complaints lately.
The complaints I'm mentioning were 4 or 5 months ago.
Okay.
Commissioner Garner?
I would like to get some sort of data on the complaints that we've received, but I haven't gotten any in a long time. So I have had a lot of friends, like even last year around, well, I guess the 4th of July. I knew some people who took the scooters to their house so that they could ride them to see the fireworks, which is probably not how it's supposed to work. But
No,
I thought that was a little bit smart on their part.
Seems fine.
So yeah, I would like to know about the number of complaints, but also am curious your thoughts a year in. Would you change anything on the structure as it is now? Would you recommend looking for a different provider of scooters now that we even seems like we've gotten over some?
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend looking for another provider. And I'm thinking that you would ask about a recommendation from us. I talked to Jay and to Dana today. And our thought is, because we haven't really been getting complaints, the ridership seems to be low. So it's not like a huge percentage of Matthews residents are taking advantage of this, but some people are. Some people are getting from point to point, not in a car at this point. And that's great, as long as there aren't lots and lots of complaints or lots of injuries, and we haven't been getting those complaints. So if it's not hurting anyone, we think that they're fine to keep going. Would you?
Mr. Hoover?
In February of 22, when we first brought this, there was discussion of an area where they can be parked. when you brought up and like a corral area.
Right. We haven't done that yet, but we can certainly further discuss that.
Right, right, because I know I see dead birds everywhere laying in sidewalks. and
It's
you-
so sad when you see a dead bird on
Yeah.
the sidewalk.
Yeah, I don't have in particular a lot of written complaints, although I have a few, but a lot of them are just, I see somebody at the grocery store or whatever, and it's, the complaints are that they're, have been deposited in the middle of a sidewalk. They block the whole sidewalk off and you have to step over them, or somebody's trying to ride their bike and there's a bird scooter laying in the middle of the sidewalk, things like that. That's the kind of complaints that I've been getting. And or you maybe have some kids take them and they just drop them wherever they're done, and they're not.
Kids aren't supposed to be taking them, but
Oh.
they might, but.
I see kids riding them. I don't know if they're bird scooters, but I see a lot of kids riding scooters and they look like.
And
birds.
I would say that at least in my neighborhood, kind of where I walk. Oh, I also want to point out that I was on 4 Mile Creek Greenway today. I walked 5 miles between my 2 meetings today. It is a very, very nice greenway. But in my neighborhood, there are frequently cars that are parked so that they're blocking the sidewalk too. And people don't really complain about that. And it's easier to walk around a bird scooter than it is to walk around a car that's just kind of blocking stuff. So I've been blocked by cars too.
All right, well, tonight's, your presentation was for information only, correct? So I'd like to encourage the public, anybody has thoughts, pro or con, please let us know, let Nadine know. Let the elected officials know, and we'll, move on from there.
And we can start talking about the parking corrals too. If Dana will let me, and Dana and Susan will let me start talking about the parking corrals. All right.
Anything further on the bird scooter program? Let's go on to the next item then, receive an update on the comprehensive plan. Ms. Bennett,
Also
you're up
me.
again.
I just wanted to let you know that things are still going on with the comprehensive plan, because I know they're not always right in front of you, but it doesn't mean that they are not working hard behind the scenes, and actually not even just behind the scenes, in front of the scenes. And just as a reminder, this is really kind of 2 plans in one. We're doing one for the entire town, and then there's also just a downtown plan. We've been trying to get out there into the community, as you can see on the project schedule, all the way across the bottom, that's public engagement. So as all of these things are going on above, a lot of scenario planning and, analyzing the vision, we're always trying to get out there into the public and talk to people, whether they want to talk to us or not. I have found that in lots of times, if you're at something like Beach Fest, which is right there, people are there to have fun, and they kind of don't make eye contact with you sometimes. But I think we talk to enough people that it's worth it to be out there. There are some people who you can have I had a 20-minute discussion with somebody at Beach Fest, and it was worth being there just for that. The big event was our open house that we had in May at the Sportsplex, which is a fabulous place to have an event like this. It was drop-in style, it went from 5 to 8, and we had 80 people attend, which I thought was really amazing. And it was 15 of those were kids, which was great because we had stuff, pictures later. We had stuff for the kids to do, and we really encouraged people because there are a lot of young families around who are like, I can't go out at night. I got kids. What do I do? So we said, bring them. And they did. So when they came into the open house, basically we had all the information that you could ever want about Matthews on boards. And that's just kind of a sample of what we had there. So they were kind of introduced to what we were doing through the boards, kind of take all of that in. We had people around to answer questions. We also had maps, like big tables of maps where we talked about some of our focus areas. One of the focus areas is, of course, downtown. The biggest comment on this one was they want to close off Trade Street, which is not going to happen probably, but it was people would see it and go, yeah, that's a great idea. Improving the connections between the surrounding neighborhoods in downtown, more green space and pocket parks, and attract businesses to downtown. And I would say not just attract businesses to downtown, people are very particular about these being mom and pop businesses. They do not want chains in the downtown. So for the EMT district, different kinds of activities, skate parks, pickleball, of course, big draws, a wider variety of consumer activities. They want the full Saturday experience, I guess, as you go play pickleball and then you go and you have dinner, you do things with the kids. It's just, they want a full experience there. It's not going. There. For Independence, what they said, the people who were talking over the maps, is the thought on Independence Boulevard seems to be, it's there. What are you going to do? But let's try and make it better-ish by repurposing vacant and abandoned buildings, save the existing trees, of course, traffic improvements, please, traffic improvements, and increase the safety. What we've heard across all kinds of public input, the survey and this, and anytime you talk to someone, is that we can't cross Independence Boulevard. There's no way. There's that side of Matthews and there's this side of Matthews, and we can't get between the two of those. That's the probably, other than the mom and pop shops, that's the biggest theme that I've heard, is we can't cross Independence. John Street, a lot of concern about reckless driving. There's a lot of concern about pedestrian crossings. Just crossing over John Street downtown is not easy, not for the faint of heart. More bike parking, and don't want the big trucks there. And John Street is, of course, a place of particular interest to us right now. So we had further discussions on John Street and what it should look like in the future. As you know, it was going to look one way. The town did not want it to. So it was going to be a 4-lane, right? And then we said, no, we don't want that. Not yet, right? So just a good time for discussions with people about what do you want to see? What would you prefer? And there is a lot of talk about keeping the downtown feel, and that if you put a bigger road in there, you lose that. And we care more about people. And if you see which type of street do you want for John Street down there on the bottom left, we asked them to put dots on, basically, do you want it more people-centric or do you want it more car-centric? And you can probably guess it was all on the people-centric cars side. So they understand that it moves lots of cars, but they want it to be nicer and a place where people can walk and it feels like downtown. Would you add anything to that, Dana? Is that about okay? Talked about some growth areas. And a lot of this was really just to get conversations going. I mean, you can take what you want from where the dots are, but a lot of it is just talking, get a feel for what people want. And again, where they want growth is the entertainment district, along the Silver Line, downtown, along 74, that's a lot, and around the medical center. They talked about not wanting it near the CPCC campus, but that was more the area that's close to John Street. And as you can guess on that one, a concern about traffic. We had more of this, less of that sheet, where you would just fill out what you wanted more of, what you wanted less of. And the responses on that seemed to be for kind of a more compact community. Although they wanted to stay suburban, but then they also wanted smaller lots, a mix of development types, and places where they can walk. So this, and that pretty much sums up like the discussions that were had then, but this is our junior planners, and I just have to show you this because I really like it. These kids really got into this. And I think there are probably kids who wanted to stay there longer than their parents wanted to stay there. That's very cute. And then here, postcards to the future Matthews. That was kind of the last station there. We've got these cards, and it really does look like a postcard. And I was going to bring some for you, and I forgot them. We were having people just fill out, basically write it like it's to Dear Matthews, I would like to see this, or I love your charm. You stay yourself, stay true to yourself. We had something that was actually kind of close to that. Then they actually put it in the mailbox, and it's kind of cute. And we have that outside right now. Jay's thinking. There are some at the front desk if you want to get them, because I was going to hand some of them out to you, and you could also do a Dear Matthews postcard and put it in the mailbox on your way out. One other thing we have going on right now, although I'm not sure anyone's taken us up on it yet, is a meeting in a box. It's like a take-home meeting. We know that not everyone wants to come here for a meeting or go to the Sportsplex for a meeting or go wherever for a meeting. So we're giving people the opportunity to have their own meeting, like have some friends over for a barbecue or go to a coffee shop and just sit down with your friends and talk about Matthews and what you want. So if you know of anybody who would like to do that, have them contact me. It's a great idea. I've done it in other communities. And it's just easier to not be at the town to have these conversations sometimes. And then they record it and they send it back to us. So I think that's it. Why, I don't know, Dana, who did the photos for I did the photos for the postcards. They're all mine.
Just a couple comments, that brought up some ideas when you were going through the various aspects of the comprehensive plan. I go to Northeast Ohio very regularly with my day job. And I know that, in the Cleveland area, all around Northeast Ohio, they have these flyover pedestrian bridges, which Jay, you and I have talked about, I think in the past. They're really nice, but they're really expensive, but they look really nice. They're kind of, arc shaped, and they're enclosed, so you can't throw anything below you, but you provide safe passage across a place like Independence Boulevard. There's quite a few of them there, and people ride bikes over them, and it just provides a safe way to connect neighborhoods. That in this case, I saw a lot of them on Highway 71 up there that cross the entire highway. But they require those really long landing pads that are, a long walkway. So I imagine they're very expensive, but boy, that'd be great if we had something like that. We have a plan for it at someday, over Independence.
You can write that on your postcard.
Yeah. And then the other thing is, I know this has been many, many years ago. I don't know if they still do this, but the town of Asheville used to close down one of their major thoroughfares in downtown on Friday nights. And they said, I forgot what they called it, but it would just be a big party. They'd close the whole no cars from like 3 o'clock to midnight every Friday through the summer or something. And it was hugely popular. Neat thing. Mayor Pro Tem McCool.
I actually was in Baltimore this past week and they had a road like that, and it was incredible, where they just temporarily closed it off for I think they do it for the Orioles game, and you can drive through, and then during the game they have it closed off. It's really, really cool, and it was bustling.
I think Greenville, South Carolina has done something similar as well.
I think if you do it on a limited basis, it's different than just shutting down your road for good.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's probably not practical, but anyway, it's good to see that you're getting lots of good public engagement. Meeting in a box, Renee, I believe, doesn't Cartpo do those? I believe so, in some of their outreaches where they put everything together and say, yeah, go have coffee or whatever with your friends and have a meeting. So
Right.
I think
There's
that's a
something
great
called,
idea.
CARPA might do on the table.
Something like that, something similar to what you said.
Right.
I remember them telling us about that. So that's a great idea.
So go out there and tell your friends and neighbors that they should do it, and just contact me and I will get them the kit.
I think you've taken advantage of it, but I know the HOA meetings, and I go to quite a few of HOA meetings, and they're always interested to know what's going on with the town, and
We should work on.
willing to give opinions, right? I mean, I get called over in the corner, hey, why don't you do this or that? So those are great opportunities.
I
as
did
well.
reach out specifically to Windrow when we were doing the open house to invite them. I'm not sure if anyone showed up, but I did.
And we had the Ashley Creek one at Squirrel Lake Park, and it was probably 50 or 60 people showed up, which was a lot for that neighborhood, and it's really good. So
Thank you.
anything else for Nadine? Thank you for the update. Good job. Let's move on to item C, receive monthly budget report. Ms. Falk.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the board. It's hard to believe that we're almost at the end of June and we're reporting on the end of May. This year has kind of just gone by rather quickly. I am, though, happy to report that revenues are continuing to do very well for the year. Local option sales tax are 19.87% higher year over year. Which is still amazing to me that they are still climbing at that rate. But I will gladly take it any day. Recreation revenues this year, which I think is really a sign of that people are back out and doing what they love to do, because recreation revenues are up 31.15% year over year. So a lot of people are coming out and taking advantage of the Parks and Rec programs and enjoying the things that are going on. Occupancy taxes, 3.07% higher year over year. And rental car tax is almost 7.4% higher year over year. So people are coming to Matthews and spending their money in Matthews, which is what we want people to do and continue to do. And that's pretty much all I have.
Any questions or comments for Teresa? I was at the farmer's market this past weekend and it had the most people I've ever seen, ever. I mean, it was, shoulder to shoulder. It was packed. I couldn't believe it. It was fantastic. So people definitely getting out a lot more and taking advantage of what we have to offer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Move on to item D, consider cancellation of the contract with Central Square. Interim Chief Sisk.
Good evening. Appreciate a few minutes you give us here. Back in February, Chief Williams came and requested some funding to help upgrade some software in our telecommunications center, which you guys approved. That was scheduled to take place April 1st, or the contract went into effect April 1st. May 15th, we had a site visit from an engineer, the boots on the ground that would be putting that in. What we found was there was a disconnect between the sales people and the actual work that could be done with there. I'm sure we've all run into that a few times. But we did not have the capabilities to support that software fully to get the full functions from that, basically because we're not a 911 center. We don't have those 911 lines that come in, which this software is built to operate off of that. We had made that very clear in the early going with our sales rep. And we were told that they could make it work. We continued to work with the engineer to the point where we had a lot of maybes. We might be able to, a lot of workarounds. Then we had a full meeting with our phone provider, Telware, the Central Square folks and us. And it really came down to, for what they were charging us, we weren't going to get nearly the functionality that we thought we were going to get. So we began discussing what should we do to rectify this. They couldn't come up with any solutions for us that would be cost effective. So we're asking that you guys would formally for us to move out of this contract with them. There's no money has been exchanged with them. They're in agreement that they wouldn't be able to provide the services that they had promised us otherwise.
Mayor Pro Tem McCool.
You answered my question. So we haven't spent, there's been no money that's good.
Commissioner Tefano.
That was my question.
Have any motions?
I'll make a motion that we cancel the contract with Central Square.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Urban. Motion made by Mayor Pro Tem. All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Yeah, it's like the salesman that tell you what mileage you're going to get on your new vehicle, right? I've never gotten the mileage ever on any vehicle I've ever purchased. I could be. I have kind of a lead foot sometimes. Let's move on to item 9E, consider offer to purchase town-owned property. Mr. Camp. I believe we also have Anthony Carr via Zoom.
Okay, yeah. It's Kyle. I think it's a different representative.
Okay.
All right, good evening again. So we have a offer to purchase some town property on the table. Just as a quick recap, back in December of 21, we formally accepted a dedication of about 7.3 acres off of Sam Newell Road in Lakeview Circle. The land was dedicated to meet the open space requirements for a new 9-lot subdivision. Since that time, the property owner is under contract to sell the property to a different developer. And upon further design work, they have determined that they need additional land for stormwater detention for the small subdivision. Accompanying the offer to purchase was a tax bill. I think it may have been a 2022 tax bill, but the offer as it stands is $21,650. I forgot the right number here. So we did, of course, just go through a revaluation. The tax value for the entire 7.3 acre tract is, as you see in your memo, about $326,800, value about $44,792 per acre. There's a couple of things going on, then we'll scroll to the map so you guys can understand the request. I did speak with Corey about this. We haven't even gotten into planning what the property might be, what the use could be. He did mention that if there's a way to secure an easement to Lakeview Circle, that could be beneficial to get people to and from the new Irvins Creek Greenway. The developer has not designed, that's the first map. So this is a zoom in that you can see right here. These are 3 lots. This is Lakeview Circle here. This is Sam Newell Road here. This is the rough boundary of the 1.13 acres that the developer would like to purchase. And if you scroll one more, Maureen, you can see the larger. So this is the larger tract that was dedicated. So again, Lakeview Circle, Sam Newell Road, got 6 lots facing Sam Newell, 3 lots facing Lakeview. So you'll also note under proposed solutions, we do have a project along Sam Newell to Sam Newell Road multi-use path. One benefit to the town of this subdivision moving forward is that the developer would be building the multi-use path along the frontage of those 6 homes. If the board is interested in this offer, there would need to be a bid deposit. We would need to set a public hearing date to announce the disposition of the property. It would be via the upset bid process. The only staff recommendation is absent any kind of appraisal right now. My recommendation would be just to look at that tax value per acre as evaluation, since it is so recent with the county tax assessor's office just being this spring. So it's about the value per acre is a little more than double the offer that we received.
Okay, any questions, comments? Motions?
I'll go ahead and make the motion. We would go ahead and move forward at the town-owned property at 3010 Lakeview Circle, contingent offer being amended to reflect the value of $44,792 per acre as outlined in the memo dated June 21st, 2023 by Jay Camp, Planning Director.
Second.
A motion by Commissioner Urban, a second by Mayor Pro Tem McCool. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Those funds would go back into our general fund.
That's correct.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to item 9F, consider town attorney contract. Mr. Buckley, do you want to?
Thank you, Mayor. The proposed contract remains as it's been for a number of years. The only change is a slight increase in the hourly rate. The potential impact on the town of that hourly rate would be, it's a $10 an hour increase to $2.75 an hour. But the impact would be, for instance, if I were to build this next year 100 hours, that would be a $1,000 increase in my revenues. If I build 120 hours, it'd be $1,200. So that's doesn't sound quite as bad as when you say $10 an hour. So I propose that that would be my contract this next year.
Commissioner Garner?
Do we have a sort of an average of the number of hours you bill over the past?
I think it runs between 100 and 120 hours a year.
Do you think?
I didn't go back and compute it, but I'm pretty sure that it runs. And see, the hours that I spend on under the retainer, which are the attendance of the board meeting and the calls and emails from the officials to me, they don't count towards that. It's only billable hours that counts towards that 100 to 120.
Okay. I mean, my next question was going to be if you had seen an uptick in those hours, but perhaps you haven't.
Well, it's hard to tell because there's an uptick in occasional months, but overall it tends to balance out because there'll be some months where I get an uptick, but then there'll be go 2 or 3 months and it'll just be not very many hours at all. So there's no way to gauge what hours or upticks will occur in the future.
Commissioner Hoover?
The concern I have with the increase, it would not just affect you, it would also apply to every one, even if they're not a partner, every attorney in there that would do something for you, like that's say going on now with an issue.
Well, it would go to the firm. It doesn't come to me.
Right. I mean, but you're making it sound like you're just going to get
Well, the
billed.
100
So
the
if
100
there's two attorneys, you're doing something, so
No,
another
that's the
attorney doing
total
anything?
hours being billed by the firm, not just by me.
Okay, so it's not per attorney.
Well,
That's
no,
why I'm
that-
trying to
it's
get
across the board.
clarification.
It's across the board for all billing hours, it'd be 275
Right,
across the board, yes.
right, right. I do have a concern. I don't know if, to be honest, I'm not sure if I really want to mention it now. Because it was something that was brought to my attention, and I was very disappointing to receive this in the mail from a constituent. And I've been in conversation with you over this, you know, in email exchanges we've had. And you don't know what I'm talking about because I have not disclosed it yet. And I don't know if this is, honestly, I don't know if this is where I should discuss this right now or not. I don't know what you want me to do. I mean,
I can't respond to that.
If there's an issue with the performance of our attorney, it should be in a closed session.
Okay.
Otherwise, you can bring up whatever you like. This time it's your prerogative.
well, it is an issue. I don't, the problem is I can't take it as fact. It's just something that's going to have to be researched and so I guess we'll just schedule a closed session for it then.
Mayor Pro Tem McCool,
Well, I would like to make a motion that we approve the contract as is in the memo.
Second. If you rephrase that to as presented, not as.
presented. That's why we're keeping you around.
a motion from Mayor Pro Tem McCool, a second by Commissioner Urban. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? That passes 5-2 with Commissioner Hoover and Commissioner Tufano in opposition. Move on to item G, discuss bulk pickup options. Commissioner Tufano, you asked to have this added, so I'll give the floor to you, sir.
Thank you. There's been quite a bit of chatter in social media and individually about this subject, so I thought it might be best to air it out in public and let the public hear the facts about what the old contract and the new contract, how they compare. So I think the big question right now is what is, and now that the dust has settled on closing the Republic contract and renegotiating the Waste Pro contract, what is the savings to the town at this moment in time?
So we reduced the budget by $215,000 over what we would have budgeted if we had kept bulk waste pickup. So the actual cost to provide bulk waste was a little bit more than that, but CJ built some dollars into the budget to account for if the town has to do some hauling at our own expense or things like that to try to account for this change. So the net reduction to the budget was $215,000 by making this change.
Which is close to 1/3% on the tax rate.
Right, but perhaps that is the answer to my question, but the question specifically was, what was the contract for Republic last year? How much is the contract for Waste Pro this year?
Okay, and I'll want to caveat that because it's not really apples to apples since they rebid it.
Correct,
And
correct, but
their new rate was different.
right.
So-
And I'll address that in a moment.
Okay, great.
Right.
Yeah, so last year it was roughly $14 and 40, well, let me give the overall amount. $1,770,000 a year was roughly what we spent on their contract.
1 million, I'm sorry,
770,000.
so 1.7. And what is the Waste Pro contract going to be this year?
So they're based on their bid. Let's see, that was before the, let's see.
I think you really
Yeah.
need to compare Republic's bid and Waste Pro's bid, not what we paid last year, because both of them went up significantly, right? I mean,
They did,
they're
yeah.
both up.
So this year's bid without bulk waste was roughly 1 million, well, roughly 2 million.
roughly 2 million, but if I recall, I think the Republic was something like 2.4, was it 2.5?
So their bid for this year was 2,650,000.
Yeah, 2.6. And so roughly 2 million for the Waste Pro.
Correct.
Okay, now, having said that, I think at least the biggest complaint that I'm hearing is that we increase taxes and we're decreasing service. So I'd like to just have a general discussion how we could possibly mitigate that. The number of pickups, bulk waste pickups last year, from the number you gave me, was roughly around 5,000.
Correct.
And the current schedule for Waste Pro is $25 or $25 for a couch or something of that nature, and then another 25 for each individual item, like a stove or a refrigerator or something of that issue.
And we've clarified that a little bit and negotiated a little bit. So it's give or take 25 for the first item and then $25 for up to 5 more items total. So $50 total.
So is that for items 2 through 5 will be an additional 25 each?
Not each. Total.
Okay. So a total of 50 for
I'm sorry.
5 items, is that correct?
Am I reading that right? I'm
So
sorry,
these
we've
numbers
been
are-
going back and
Yeah,
forth.
these numbers are important, so because of the proposal that I'm going to make.
Good evening. So with town manager, Hawk's assistance and the staff here, with Public Works, the amount of charge was $25 up to the size of a couch.
Mhm.
And then items 2 through 5, that was $25. Items 2 through 5, meaning larger than that, would then be $50.
$50 total for items 2 through 5,
It would be the 25 plus the $50.
plus the 50, so a total of 75.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, if you have an appliance, a white good item,
Mm-hmm.
that is $25
Per unit.
per white good item.
Okay.
It has to go to a separate facility for disposal and such. So those are 2 different components.
Now, this is probably a statistic you cannot give me, CJ, or the town manager, but was wondering what was the mix of pickup items from Republic last year?
So I don't have that. I will say that there are not very many white goods or appliances.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, by the time the truck gets there, somebody's already picked it up.
Right. So this is the numbers that I was sort of going on in my head is we've got, if Waste Pro would consider being the accountant in this matter, that we would have allocate a maximum dollar amount for each household throughout the year for like an account, if you will. And so even if the 5,000 pickups last year, let's say the account, and I'm throwing numbers out there right now, let's say the account was $50. So that would be 250,000, which is less than half of the savings that we would normally have had between Waste Pro and Republic. So I'm just brainstorming ideas that we have some kind of account or an account to draw from that each resident could use, but that would entail having an accounting function for Waste Pro. Now, the excess of above that account would be billed directly to the property owner. So just an idea. I'm trying to get some bulk waste pickup in here, yet not eat up the entire savings that we had going to Waste Pro.
I just want to try to provide some clarity, and town manager, feel free to jump in, and then Commissioner Garner, I'll get to you. We went to Waste Pro because they had a significant cost savings over what Republic was going to charge us. And this is totally anecdotally, and one of the pieces of information I asked for is the 5,200 pickups that we had. How many unique households was that? Do we have one household doing 150 pickups, which we may have in some cases? Anecdotally, when I talk to people, many people, including Commissioner Urban, didn't even know we had bulk pickup. Most people don't use it. And so I was uncomfortable adding that, and I think the rest of the board was too, when we voted to add that cost to everybody when many people, and I suspect the majority, never use the service. It worked out to being $42 per household, but that's not really the whole story because it's really not per household, it's per all properties within the town. It's about $13 per household, I think. Is that correct?
Based on a $400,000 valuation.
Based on a $400,000 house. So again, and I know this is controversial, but my thought was, why charge every household $13 when the majority never use it? They never use the service. So we say you have to pay it because you're going to subsidize those that do. So that was the thought, to have it, each person pay for it separately. So that's how we got to where we are now. Now, if there's another way to skin the cat, I'm all for it. But that was the thought process, is why are we charging a fee to every single household when the majority of households never use this service? And that's certainly was what I was thinking when we did this. I don't know if you want to respond to that, and Commissioner Garner, you've got a comment.
I do have a comment. I was surprised when we got Becky's email with the schedule of fees for this. And I went back and listened to the April 24th meeting where, we were deciding how we wanted to move forward. And we were told at that meeting, and I'm reading from the transcript, so if the words are not exactly right, they're pretty close. It said, we are anticipating that the cost is going to be approximately $25 to $30, depending on the number of items they have at the curb for collection and what the content actually is. They would call in to schedule and we would get that information. We'll be able to base accordingly. So we were making a decision with the thought that multiple items may be $30. Maybe I misunderstood and I'm one off on the board and didn't understand what was being said. That one item would be $25 and then it would be $5 for an additional item or two, depending on, how long I guess it takes to get the item in the truck. This idea that it's $75 for a pickup is a huge departure from what I understood.
And I apologize. I don't mean to interrupt. And Melinda, this may be clarification that we need to make because I was not in agreement with 75 for up to 5 items. What I thought we were agreeing to was one item is 25. And then if you have 2 to 5 items total, you're paying $50 total. So 25 for your first item, and then essentially $25 for items 2 through 5. So it's $50 total for up to 5 items, not $75. So if that was a miscommunication on our part, certainly we need to clarify that, but I just want to make it clear that was not what I thought I was agreeing to. And that is not how I read the email. So to me, it's saying if you have anywhere from 2 to 5 items, you'll be paying $50 total. It's not stacked. So I just want to be clear that that was not something that, that we were trying to negotiate and find some common ground, because the initial conversation that we got back from Waste Pro when we started asking questions was that every single item would be $25, and that felt excessive very, very quickly. So this was an attempt to try to get down to a lower number. But we did have the same recollection from the conversation in the previous board meeting that it felt like there was an understanding that kind of an average load, if you will, would not cost a homeowner more than $25 to $30. So this was trying to find some middle ground, but in no cases was staff saying that we supported something that would be $75 for up to 5 items.
Can I ask, like, if the board understood that as I understood it?
I agreed. That was my understanding as well.
And mine as well. So, but back to your point, Mayor, is in effect, this is just charging the people that use it, but we're subsidizing in a small amount, whatever the charge will be. So in other words,
that's what your suggestion is.
yeah. So in other words, those that do use it, that we have an account, if you will, just a maximum dollar amount per resident. And once they exceed that, then it's charged directly to them. So even at, let's say the account is $50 and based on the 5,200 pickups we had last year, and 50 perhaps is generous, but that would be $250,000 or $260,000, which is only half. This is less than half of the savings. So I'm just trying to come up with a plan to quell the angst that is being felt by those that do use the service, and that the fact that they feel as though their taxes have been increased and their services have been reduced.
Commissioner Tavano, I just want to clarify. So the cost savings in the budget by cutting this service was $215,000. So 200 pickups at $50
Is
is
$260,000.
$260,000.
Right. I was using the comparison between the Republic quote and the Waste Pro quote.
Okay.
All right. So that's
Right. So the way we're looking at cost savings is because we were going with Waste Pro, the cost savings in our budget process was
And
$215,000.
I understand that number.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but anyway, that's where I'm just throwing it out there for brainstorming. And I'm obviously, I think the public would welcome any kind of creativity and ideas that we might have. Yes.
And Manager Hawk, you are correct. I apologize for the way it's written in this. This is what we discussed, and it is one item that was $25. If they had 2 to 5 items, it was $50, not the incremental of that. I do want to clarify that.
Thank you.
So even if we drop that subsidy down to $25, what I'm trying to do is I'm fishing for ideas here on how to make those people that normally use this service feel as though that they're being properly acknowledged.
How do we intend on paying for this? Because
There's no cost. That's why I asked Waste Pro if they would be amenable to being the accountant in this process. In other words, anything over a particular amount would be billed directly to the homeowner. Anything up to that amount would be billed to the town.
Ms. Hawk?
I believe to clarify though, that with the budget that we just approved, there's no available funding for the sort of escrow account that you're talking about, that the town would take on that additional expense. So we don't have anything in the FY24 budget that would be readily able to absorb the type of program that you're talking about. So from a revenue standpoint, do you have thoughts on essentially how would we pay for that escrow account?
Well, I'm a little confused. I thought during the budget discussion, we had a $475,000 surplus from last year.
So what you would be referring to then would be our general fund balance.
Which is with the 475,000, where would that put us in terms of percentage?
I don't know that
Yeah.
offhand.
So what I'm asking for is some of that surplus to be returned to those people that use this service in some way that would give them the feeling as though they haven't had their taxes increased and their services reduced. So again, an idea, open to, hopefully this will generate some kind of discussion that will help mitigate some of these concerns from our taxpayers. Thank you.
Well, I used the pickup once in the 21 years I've lived in Matthews. So I'm not aware of a lot of people that use this multiple times, and there may be, but I mean, how many times are you going to replace a refrigerator or a couch? I mean, is this something you do 4 or 5 times a year, every year, year in, year out?
Actually, that works in the favor of my suggestion. So in other words, if it's the same persons that are using this service over and over again, and it's always good to ask for the actual distinct and unique users.
I did ask for that data for tonight, and we didn't get it in time.
Okay.
Republic wouldn't provide it to us,
They going
so.
to provide it?
I'll say I did get an email at about 4:50. He said he wasn't able to pull that the way they compile the data.
Right. But
So it's not, so it sounds like it's not available from Republic.
right.
It's available. They don't want to give it to us. It's obviously available.
And I, like you, don't use the service. But if there are people that do use it and there are a smaller number of unique users that are different than the 5,200, that would actually work in the favor of the suggestion that I'm making. So again, it would be good to know what that unique number is so that we would know what the cost to the town would be, because it would only be up to that amount. So let's say $25. If their pickups, regardless, over 1 year period were to exceed $25, they would be billed directly. Up till $25 would be billed to the town.
So
So
basically what you're saying is everybody gets the first pickup for free for one item. And after that, they have to.
after that, correct. But the likelihood of everybody doing it is statistically slim. So as a matter of fact, probably non-existent.
Mr. Garner.
I'm still a little bit concerned about the difference in $30 and $50, especially to somebody on a limited income.
Which 30 and which 50 are we talking about?
What we were quoted and then the actual numbers coming to us.
Yeah, I also share that concern. It feels a bit bait and switchy to me. I don't know if I would have supported their contract. I didn't know it could be $50, $75, whatever that number was. I mean, it's really tough to swallow, especially to put on people. I totally agree.
Well, for my suggestion, even has a chance of working, and there would have to be an accounting burden on the part of Waste Pro. So it's a matter of whether or not you're even willing to accept that. If you're not willing to accept that, then I will withdraw whatever suggestions that I had.
If I may.
Sure.
So our system is set up that every caller, as I mentioned before, calls in, they let us know the number of items that goes through our Trackie system. That's all recorded. So there's a report that can be generated daily, weekly, monthly, whatever. It shows the address and it shows the items that were called in to be picked up. So it's a report that can, again, is easily accessible at any point throughout the day, whenever it wants to be pulled. So we can provide that. I don't think it creates an undue burden on our accounting team. It just would be something we would want to pilot around for a month or two and kind of see how that we're providing the information that you're looking for and that it's working for us as well. But we're,
Melinda,
flexible to adjust.
Thank you.
Melinda, surely you have this data for other similarly sized towns. I mean, what percentage of people in a town the size of Matthews typically call for bulk pickup in a year? Is it 10%, 20%, 50%? Do you have any idea?
It's a very small number. It's,
I-
would you say
Off the top of my head.
20%? Yeah.
So again, this is why this board, I know there's a lot of angst in the community, but we're asking, 80% of the people in town that never use this service to subsidize the 20% that use it. So I agree with all the comments that have been made previously, but that was what our thought process was, that it would have been nice if we had that exact data for Matthews so we knew what the percentage was here, but that sounds reasonable to me. Again, many people that I talked to didn't even know that we had this, you had an opportunity to do bulk pickup.
So other than addressing Renee's point, and I agree with you that this escalation, I didn't quite understand the exponential growth of it. We can resolve that. My recommendation would be is get through the year with Waste Pro. They've got the data, the accounting to analyze that, and maybe it's more broad in use than specific. And maybe then there's something in the budget work next year, you sit there and say, I don't know how you're going to do it. This is the problem I have in my head. How do you know if you give everybody credit, you give everybody a one haul, how do they check the box? But I guess there's a way. I mean, there's a will, and then that's fine. And so everybody knows moving forward, they get one free haul. And if you don't use it, it just sort of better for us. Because from that standpoint, but I don't know that we could.
You get one free haul every 10 years or something.
Something to that effect. But I think we need to get the data going from that aspect of it. And I think we need to resolve the dollar and cent issues. Things I think that's more at heart to what the board heard versus what we're talking about.
But if we only have 20% of our folks using it, then that's not that high of a burden.
And from what Melinda's saying with the data, we're gonna know who that 20% is,
Yes.
given time. So it might be Joe's cardboard box factory. He works out of his home and
Right.
he's using it
That-
every week
that's
for
what I
100
suspect.
times. Yeah, okay.
Right, and you would undoubtedly have the information that we all seek, and that is the number of unique users in other towns that you're working with, I would imagine, correct? So it'd be an interesting statistic to know what the percentage of the population, or a percentage of homeowners, use the service, and of those, how many are unique users? Okay. So, and that is a huge statistic to know, because that has an immediate bottom line impact. But the fact, I think there's a psychological effect here as well, and that is that the taxpayers would know that at least they have a pickup that they could take advantage of, even though, like you and I, we never have used it and probably never will. So anyway, I've said my piece. I've given my recommendation, and open for comment.
Commissioner Garner?
I have a question about the process. So if somebody calls and says that they have a pickup for 2 chairs, but then their neighbor comes by and picks them up, and your truck is sent out and those chairs are not there, are they billed for that, or is that flush?
Under the current program of them calling the inn, that would be the $25 that's collected up front for the service. The driver goes out to retrieve those items. If it's not there, we're not sure what happened to it, but we did deploy the staff to collect.
I can tell you in my neighborhood, other than a television, the 500-pound old televisions, if you put anything out, somebody comes on, I mean, there's people that regularly just drive by and pick stuff up, and it doesn't stay there, I mean, for more than a minute until somebody picks it up.
Melinda, can I ask to that effect? So if I were to call and I were to give you my credit card and pay and schedule, and then I saw somebody come pick up the items, so they're gone, and I called you and said, hey, never mind, they're gone, I don't need your service anymore. Do you offer a refund because you haven't then deployed the truck, or what happens in that situation?
Great question. I'm not sure that we've had that scenario happen before, other than the appliance that goes missing when the driver goes out to pick it up. But each town's service is set up a little uniquely. There's not one that's the exact same from others. In that situation, we would have billed them. The driver, if they went out, there would definitely be the charge for that. If it's a call on Wednesday and we're not coming to pick them up until Friday and they call to cancel, I don't know of any reason why we couldn't, refund that credit back, to them. We haven't deployed the truck. So the short answer is the truck hasn't been deployed. There should be an easy way to fix that.
To piggyback on that though, if it's all possible, in that communication, you need to make it explicitly clear. Yes, Mr. Jones, we're going to pick up your refrigerator on such and such day. Notify us immediately should that piece of equipment disappear from your doorstep before we send out a truck. Otherwise, we will be forced to charge you. I think that way we're not going to get the phone calls. Well, they charged me anyway. And I think it's going to happen. We know that, but at least we can be proactive and get out in front of it. Just warn them, hey, you're going to put something out there. If it's gone, let us know before we deploy the truck and we'll credit you the money back.
What is the consensus of the board regarding the town doing one pickup for each household on our dime over a set period of time or whatever? Does anybody have any?
I think it's figured out, but I don't think it's going to happen in this
What was
cycle.
the question again?
So we think it's probably 10 or a maximum of 20% of our households that request this service per year. And what if we had a policy that said the town will pay for the first pickup?
Up to a certain amount.
Can we
Up to
afford that?
$25.
Yeah.
Well, if it's 10% of 5,200 and somebody can do the math, I mean, not 5,200 of 70.
We have about 9,600.
Importantly, if I may interrupt, more importantly is the unique number of users. That is an important piece of information. If you could glean that from your other contracts, that would be helpful.
960 times $25 is,
So I believe what was seen in other communities is maybe something closer to 20%.
Yes, so Ted Good is our division manager, who is going to be responsible for all the services here in Matthews. But we have a neighboring community that has approximately the same number of residents for Matthews as a good comparison. So we can get some information. In fact, CJ had already asked when we got here this evening if we could pull some data. So what we can do is pull that information, provide it back to town staff and disseminate from there and glean what kind of materials, the average number of items, and then the repeat individual, who's using the service, if that would add some assistance.
going back to my earlier comment regarding the large televisions, did I read in your documentation that you don't pick those up? Is that correct?
That is correct. That is considered e-waste material, and we would not be collecting that.
Yeah. Okay. Commissioner Garner?
Yes, I'm curious what, maybe it's too late in the game for this, but what a quarterly pickup bulk like they do in Indian Trail, what the cost difference is on that and this. Feels like we're getting really complicated with this, and if
Yeah, we had discussed it actually before. There is a cost savings, but we've talked to other towns that have done that. And problem is you have people leaving so much stuff out at one time that it takes months to collect. And we don't want months of stuff sitting on the side of the road. So we didn't pursue that.
Plus, if I buy a new refrigerator, I want to keep my old one for 3 months before I get rid of it necessarily. But Commissioner Hoover?
Yeah, you are 100% correct on that. My son lives in Indian Trail, and they start at a certain point and they start stacking and they stack, and you drive through these neighborhoods and stuff, and it's awful. Yeah, I wouldn't. That's not good.
The thought. What I'm hearing, I think we need some more information, so maybe we possibly could offer some assistance, but we just need to know some more data. So if you guys could get us that data, that'd be good. CJ, any hope of getting that data from Republic? I don't buy that they don't have the data. They've got a Excel spreadsheet that's got the addresses of everything they picked up, and they can you can do a real quick operator there and find out how many unique ones there were. So I don't buy the fact that they don't have this data at all.
Yeah, the person that's in the position is brand new and he may not just be looking in the right place. What he told me is since it was collected with their regular waste drivers, that they didn't have a separate one going out, that they didn't pick it up. But they have people that have to call in, so there should be record of it
They've got a
that way.
database somewhere, obviously. I mean, I don't buy that they don't have that. If they don't give it to us, that's fine, but that's unfortunate because I don't think there's a legitimate reason not to give it to us. All right, so I guess we'll go with that. If there's no further discussion, we'll get some additional information and see what we can do with that. Let's move on to the next item. This is the 7I from the consent agenda. Housing needs adjustment. Commissioner Hoover, you had some questions or concerns about that item?
Yes, I just really some questions, I guess you could say. I know, read the minutes on this and what it was discussed, and it was voted to pull from the ARPA funds. For me, I think we need to kind of stop picking little bits and pieces from the ARPA funds. We need to watch every penny we have on that, being the fact that we have a fire station that we want to build. And I was just going to ask, I don't know if this is possible, but on May 9th of 2022, we approved the $90,000 town manager to award grants. Can that be pulled from that you're allowed to do, Becky, to pay for this?
So the action that you're referring to is just an authorization mechanism. So that was not setting aside a separate fund of money for me to be able to utilize. That was an authorization function that allows me to just sign any contract up to $90,000, but that the dollars for a contract that fits within that has to otherwise be budgeted somewhere else within the budget. So it's not a separate fund
Got
amount.
it. Okay, I wasn't sure. And then the second question was just because we do have that surplus of 470,000 in the general fund balance, can we pay it from that?
That would certainly be up to the board if you wanted to do that. I will say this was really one of the very first actions that the board took related to expenditures of ARPA dollars. This is just the budget amendment to make that payment official. So all of the calculations that we have provided to the board related to available ARPA funds have always already been taking this expenditure into account because we knew that it was encumbered and this work was already underway. So this doesn't deplete from the available funds that we've otherwise been discussing. This has always been sort of on the books. This is just the paperwork to close the loop on that.
Right, but I was looking at it, could put it back in and that will add up to it more. And because that's just the way we need every cent we can get for the fire station 3.
Sure.
So that's just how I mean, whatever.
Yeah, sure. And I think another way to look at it, and again, it's certainly up to the board, but if you were to not use ARPA funds for this and then use general fund dollars for it, you could really do the reverse with funding the fire station. So because it's all sitting in the general fund. And so it's really kind of whichever way you would want the accounting to go. But at the end of the day, it could be viewed as kind of the same amount of net dollars out of that account.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think of that, but we would have to remember to make that little switch. So, okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hoover, do you want to make a motion regarding your suggestion?
Sure. I'll make sure I say this right. I'd like to make a motion to pull. Is it 55,008? Am I reading the right number? $55,893.60 from the general fund balance to pay for, to approve the budget. I'm lost. Help me out, because this is going to the opera funds. Help me out.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the budget amendment appropriating $55,894 in ARPA funds to cover the cost of the comprehensive housing needs assessment completed in March 2023. And then do you want me to put the caveat that we use the general fund dollars? Is that what was discussed for?
Yeah, I mean, I think as the manager said, it's really maybe just swapping some funds out, but if that makes, you feel better about having the fire station money more allocated out of ARPA, I mean, it's half a dozen of one and 6 of the other to me.
Yeah, I don't care either way. I can do general fund or ARPA either way, whatever.
The concern is we'll forget and then it won't happen. And but who knows, maybe not. I mean, that's just my concern. So whatever the board wishes,
Okay,
I'm
so
content with, because we can
Take
switch it either way.
Take the ARPA fund out of your motion.
And
put
just
in
make it general fund. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll restate this. I'll approve the budget amendment appropriating $55,894 in general funds to cover the cost of the comprehensive housing needs assessment completed in March 2023.
That's where I missed out. Thank
are
you.
you going to second that?
I will
Is that- or is
second that.
your motion?
Thank you.
Or any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Move on to the mayor's report. I have a couple items. I want to make this board aware that I serve on both the Metropolitan Transit Commission as well as the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization. And Commissioner Garner also serves on CARTPO. And I want to make you aware that the memos of understanding for both those organizations between the towns and the county and Charlotte are all being, I think, by legislative decree rewritten. I think they're done every 10 years. And as far as the MTC goes, you may have seen some of this talked about in the news, but with the Metropolitan Transit Commission, the commission voted, and it's made up of all the mayors of Mecklenburg County and a county representative, mayor of Charlotte. And the voting members voted to have a independent third party come in and investigate the derailment that happened last May of a rail car within the system. And when it got to Charlotte, some of the Charlotte commissioners decided that they didn't want the towns telling them how to spend their money. And they said, no, we're not going to do it. And so a lot of the discussion that bubbled up from the MTC is, well, why do we even have an MTC if we vote on something and our wishes aren't followed? So right now, just so you know, all the other towns and the county contribute about $80 million to CAT's budget. Matthews contributes, Becky, I think between 1.5 and 2 million, something like that. So it's in that neighborhood, and it comes from our taxes, so it's automatically taken. Town manager doesn't write a check to the MTC. But anyway, so there's some discussion with this MTC memo of understanding of putting some more stronger language into it so that we have more say and can't be just overruled summarily by Charlotte. There is a subcommittee that's meeting. It's a group of Charlotte folks and Mayor Melinda Bales from Huntersville, and I serve on that meeting. We were supposed to meet this week and that meeting was canceled, but we're going to meet on July 11th, I believe. So that's the Metropolitan Transit Commission, CATS, and the buses and rail cars, et cetera. So I'd like to ask Commissioner Garner if you could give an update on because you serve on the Memo of Understanding Committee for CARTPO. So could you give us an update on that, please?
I would be glad to. So our committee is 8 members and it's we're spread throughout the county and beyond. CARTPO consists of, let me find it. Well, 68 votes total, but I think it's 27. I don't know. I can't do the math. Members, and that includes members from DOT and Mooresville and beyond, Statesville and beyond, just Mecklenburg County. So 8 of us are meeting and going over the MOU. We have so far looked at previous MOUs to see, to understand how we got to the number of votes that Charlotte gets. So on the CRTPO, Charlotte gets 46% of the votes. They need 2 or 3 other entities, which could be DOT, it could be the county, to vote with them for something to pass. So we as an MOU subcommittee are looking at those votes. The last time it was reviewed was in 2012, 2013, when I believe that's when they added an MTC seat to it. They look at how much cost share each town contributes and decided whether that it would be based on population, I believe. And so now we have gotten through looking at the history. The 2020 census numbers affect the number of votes and who's invited to be a part of the CRTPO. So we've looked at that a little bit. And then given a brief update to the CRTPO board at large. Sorry, this is going on a little longer than soon we will have a review of what other MOUs do. So looking at Raleigh, Atlanta, other or not other MOUs, other MPOs do. So looking at other sort of metropolitan regions, looking at alternatives to this weighted vote structure. And then we'll also look at the cost share amount, and then eventually make a recommendation to the board. We had hoped to be finished late August, but also our subcommittee meeting was canceled for the end of this month, and we won't get through the work that we have to do for it to happen by August. It seems like now that other towns have written letters of recommendation that to change the weighted voting, it's going to be a slower process, and we're going to be a little more, I guess, detailed in how we go through it, making sure that everybody has a voice at the table.
So again, I mean, I guess they're looking for a compromise as well, because Charlotte only needs like 2 other towns. Is that what I think?
It's 2 or 3. And I did look at, so in 1981, there were 15 votes total. Charlotte got 6, Mecklenburg got 2, and everybody else got 1. And that sort of same percentage stayed true until 2000, when there were 23 votes and Charlotte got 9. So it's 40% up until 2013, when Charlotte came in the room and said, nope, we're going to take 46% of the votes. They changed the voting structure so that towns with a population more of greater than 20,000 would each get 2 votes. And then stripped Mecklenburg of one of their votes. They had 3, now they have 2.
So, you know, it's kind of walking the fine line. Charlotte has more people living there than all the rest of the towns in the county combined. So we certainly want to give them a weighted vote, but when they have such a weighted vote, it really, you know, they pretty much decide what's going to go on, and the rest of us are kind of along for the ride. So we're hoping that we can reach some compromises in both. Now, in the MTC, every community gets 1 vote, but Charlotte just decided not to go along with what the vote was. So again, we hope to get these memos of understanding laid out, and we'll give you more details. And I'd like to, Renee, I'd like to ask you and myself to give somewhat regular updates on MTC and CARTPO to the elected officials here. I think that's something we've neglected to do, and we should do, so that you guys are aware of what's going on with those organizations. The other thing I want to quickly go over is, you know, at our last meeting, we had our budget vote, and it was somewhat contentious and got kind of heated, but I do want to make it's always uncomfortable to raise taxes, but I want our citizens to know that North Carolina has several programs available to provide tax relief for low income senior citizens, individuals with permanent disabilities, and disabled veterans or their surviving spouse. So I want to go over a couple of these real quickly. The first one is the elderly or disabled homestead exemption. North Carolina allows property exclusions for senior adults and disabled individuals. If you qualify, you can receive an exclusion of either $25,000 or 50% of the taxable value of your residence, whichever is greater. Secondly, there's an elderly or disabled property tax deferral, which is known as a circuit breaker program. The circuit breaker program allows qualifying individuals the option to defer a portion of their property taxes owed on their permanent residence. And finally, there's a disabled veteran homestead exclusion for North Carolina, and it excludes property taxes from the first $45,000 of assessed value for specific real property occupied as a permanent residence by a qualifying owner, and there is no age or income requirement for this program. There's more information about all of these programs on Mecklenburg County's website, cao.mecnc.gov/tax relief programs. So certainly hope that everyone in Matthews that's eligible for these programs takes advantage of them. That's all I've got for the mayor's report. Go on to the town attorney's report.
Briefly, Mayor, thank the board for the contract extension between now and next year. And just to let everybody know, this will be the last contract I will seek from the town. So I appreciate this opportunity for this contract. Secondly, I will be out of the town July 3rd through July the 19th. So that means that Mr. Bowie will be here in attendance at the first meeting in July. And the second meeting in July has been postponed. So what I'm asking now is the Municipal Attorney's Summer Conference will be held in Wilmington the first weekend in August. And since I won't be in attendance for that, I would like permission to attend that conference under the existing employee travel plan.
We normally vote on that.
Yes.
So I'll make a motion to approve that.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, second by Commissioner Urban to attend the what?
North Carolina Municipal Attorneys Summer Conference being held in Wilmington, August 5th through August 7th.
What he said. All in favor? Any opposed? We have Commissioner Tefano and Commissioner Hoover in opposition, all others in favorable 5-2. Thank you.
And thank you, Mayor.
All right. All right, town manager report.
I will also not be in attendance at the next meeting, so you will be in the capable hands of Assistant Town Manager Malia Gordon, but otherwise no report. Thank you, Mayor.
I did neglect to mention one other thing in the mayor's report, and that is that I will be attending the Metro Mayor's Summer Conference in Raleigh on Wednesday with several of our other mayors, and that's always a good time to network and get best in class ideas for how to run our towns. And we're going to have the opportunity to have lunch with the governor, so we're looking forward to that. Talk to some of our representatives there. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, second by Commissioner Whitley. All in favor? All